My fiance isn't being invited to my best friend's wedding, all because his future bride-to-be doesn't want people thinking that my fiance is prettier than her. And now my entire friendship I feel is being torn apart, as I'm now stuck between a rock and a hard place of whether I should show up to his wedding alone or if I should stand by my fiance and not go as well. Because right now I'm so confused and I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my lifelong best friend is getting married later this year, and when he first got engaged, he asked me to be one of the groomsmen. I obviously accepted and have been excited for the wedding and to see my best friend finally get married. Now his fiance and my fiance have always gotten along really well. The four of us hang out pretty frequently, always have a great time, and there has never been any problems. My fiance has always considered her a friend and has been extremely happy for them and excited about their wedding. His fiance has even asked my fiance for her thoughts and suggestions on certain decor for the wedding, as well as the venues, colors, and things like that. The official wedding invitations were sent out recently, and when it arrived at our house, I noticed it was only addressed to me and also didn't say anything about a +1. Now I was kind of surprised by this because I had been assuming that my fiance would be invited given the fact that I've been with my fiance for 4 years now, which is longer than he has been with his fiance. He has been my best friend since preschool. The four of us hang out all the time, and some of my family members received invitations to the wedding. But before jumping to conclusions, I thought maybe none of the groomsmen or other friends of the bride and groom are allowed to have a +1 due to cost or things like that, since weddings are obviously expensive. The other groomsmen are all friends of mine and his, so I called them to see if their significant others were also not invited. Well, it turns out every single one of them received an invitation that included their significant other, and the bridesmaids all get to bring their significant others as well. So at that point, I called him to let him know that I got my invitation, but that my fiance was not included on the invitation, and I asked if there was some kind of error or if they had forgotten to include her on it. Well, that's when he informed that his fiance doesn't want my fiance coming to the wedding because she doesn't want all the guests thinking that my fiance is prettier than her. Now, I will say my fiance is insanely gorgeous. If I had a penny every time someone asked me how I managed to get her, I would be a billionaire. On the other hand, his fiance isn't the most conventionally attractive woman. I feel bad saying that, and it's something I have never said out loud to anyone, but for context to the situation, I wanted to include that here. I told him that I know it's not my wedding, so I don't get to pick the guest list, but I think it's a bit unfair and ridiculous that my fiance, who they are friends with, is the only significant other of the whole entire wedding party that doesn't get to come to the wedding because his fiance is worried that people will think she is prettier than her. I told him that his fiance is the bride, so everyone is going to be looking at her and no one's going to be focusing on my fiance, who by the way isn't even a bridesmaid, so she's not even going to be standing up in front of everyone or anything like that. He said that he agrees with me and that he has already tried multiple times to explain this to his fiance, but that she won't budge and is insistent that everyone will think my fiance is prettier. So I ended up telling him that I cannot be a groomsman or attend the wedding then, because in my eyes, it's not fair to my fiance for me to attend or be in a wedding where she is the only significant other not invited due to the bride's own insecurities. Well, he's upset with me now and thinks I'm overreacting, but I just don't think this is fair. My fiance told me not to worry about her and that I should be part of my best friend's big day, but even with my fiance being completely fine with me going, I honestly just don't want to be around the bride. What should I do? Okay, for the love of your future marriage, do not go to that wedding. Seriously, inform him that you will not be going if your fiance is not also there. Because in my opinion, just because your fiance is saying go doesn't mean that that's permission to go. She's probably just trying to be nice and she's trying to be like, oh, it's okay, just go ahead and enjoy yourself. When in reality, she's probably mind-boggled at how stupid this lady is. Because trust me, if this lady wants to act like that, then you could easily turn around and be like, okay, well, if my fiance's not coming to your wedding, then you and your wife are not coming to mine. Because in my opinion, your top priority right now is to stand by your fiance and not allow this crap to fly for a second, even if she says she's okay with this, because fundamentally, this is so wrong. So yeah, your best friend is a jerk for not sticking up for you and your fiance, and his fiance is even worse for making this assumption, because quite literally, your fiance didn't do anything wrong, and she does not deserve this treatment in the slightest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled manager fires me, but still expects me to work the last 2 shifts of the week. But everything goes south fast for this manager, as they are very quickly fired for making me work shifts that I no longer was employed for. And it honestly feels so good that I got back at this guy in the way that I did. Here's what happened. Okay, so I worked at this after-school care place. It was always always held at the back of the elementary school in my area, and I would change sites pretty regularly. A lot of high schoolers worked there, including me at the time, and I quite frankly loved that job. And sure, while I did absolutely love this job, I hated my manager. He was a higher up within the company that would stop by and oversee to make sure everything was going smoothly. Now, he was more important than a manager, but that's what I'm going to refer to him as from now on. He was horrible at his job, and everyone I worked with agreed. For example, there was plenty of times someone should have been fired, and he was too chicken to do it. Like a coworker who had shown up drunk to work, one that targeted me and multiple women that we worked with, who was reported by multiple of us, and one that would literally disappear for hours during her work hours. The real problem, however, came very shortly before he fired me, all because I missed my shift. Now, I had just left school, and as I was getting into the car, I accidentally closed the door on my fingers, like the middle of my fingers. And it was so hard, I broke 2 of them and had to rush to the hospital. On the way, I shot him a quick text that my friend sent who drove me because I was crying way too hard to call him up. Now, in the contract I signed when I got the job, a no-call, no-show resulted in being fired. That is, unless it was a medical emergency. So after I came to work with one of those splints on 2 of my broken fingers, he came to the site I was at with a write-up that I had to sign. Now, I asked him why because I told him before my shift had even started, but he looked at me and said, "I called you saying you still had to come in and you didn't answer." But I had no service in the ER, so I never got it. I told him there's no way he expected me to come in with 2 broken fingers, and he told me that it wasn't his problem. So he fired me, but told me I was still expected to show up for my 2 final shifts of the week, which he had done 20 minutes before first shift, and I honestly was so in shock. Well, on my second to last day, a different higher up stood by that I had never met just to check in. She came over and introduced herself, holding out her hand, and when I told her my name, she retracted her hand and walked away without another word. After my shift, a coworker called me and let me know that my manager had called every single coworker of mine and told them that if I showed up again to call the police because I wasn't supposed to be there for my last 2 shifts. Now, I was in shock. He had told me to go to them. There was even an HR person sitting in on our meeting that could confirm this, so I went to the human resources department. I then had a meeting with the head of the department and the woman who was there when I got fired. I then told them about the coworker who had harassed me, the write-up that didn't make sense, and the HR person confirming that he had told me to show up for my shifts. And this is where the revenge finally takes in place because he got fired because of me. They went around to my other coworkers who confirmed my story and they fired him. I learned this a few months after the whole debacle when talking to a school friend of mine. Her mom works in the school district and confirmed to me that he had been fired because of me. To this day, whenever I remember it, I smile. And yes, I do sort of feel bad, but when I tell you my story doesn't even include the half of what this manager did and didn't do, you would understand why I feel so happy. Although this may not be deemed as petty, I think it is because I have an attitude of if I'm going down, he's coming down with me. And that is honestly the only reason that I went to human resources. Oh yeah, this story is wonderful because I can't stand people who act like this. Managers who literally are just trying to find reasons to drag you down when they themselves don't even do their job right. Seriously, it seems like any manager is either completely incompetent or they're awesome and they're great at their job. And sure, there's like a little bit of gray area, but it seems like those 2 categories stand out the most. The people who are idiots somehow work their way up the food chain, and the awesome managers just never stick around because they're never recognized. So yeah, this guy sucked and I'm so glad that you got him fired. But I know for a fact if I was in your shoes, I would have never worked those last 2 shifts because that guy is out of his mind if he expects me to work even after he said I was fired, since that situation is never gonna fly in my book. An entitled Karen and her husband demands that I hand over my collectible Shadow the Hedgehog figure right as we're standing in line at a Build-A-Bear workshop to have him stuffed. And even though I said no to this Karen and her husband, I was still creeped out by the way they treated me, with me quickly leaving the store as soon as we paid. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I'm a 22-year-old autistic female, and I've had a lifelong special interest in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's been a deep obsession my entire life. So, of course, the new movie was a huge deal for me. Adding on to this, one of my favorite characters from the franchise is Shadow, because of course he is. For Christmas this year, I received the gift set of his Build-A-Bear, Voice Box, Chaos Emerald, and the actual plush. He was given to me unstuffed because we wanted to stuff him in store for the sake of the old times. For reference, I was a big Build-A-Bear kid apparently, and we had a family friend who was a manager there and would give me bears all the time. Now, many of you may not know this, but this particular Build-A-Bear is in high demand right now. He was essentially sold out everywhere once the movie had released, and people are still desperately awaiting a restock. So I was incredibly lucky to get Shadow, especially the gift set, which I'm deeply thankful for. So with that backstory in mind, my family was going out to Texas Texas to visit family right after Christmas. So we took the unstuffed Shadow along and planned to get him stuffed at the local mall's Build-A-Bear store. My younger cousin in high school also tagged along to buy some Bluey Build-A-Bear plushies for her friend as a late Christmas gift. We get there and notice a long line. This Build-A-Bear only had the stuffing and naming machines, so there wasn't any of the other typical Build-A-Bear process things. And you know what? I didn't mind that much. I was just happy to get Shadow stuffed. Since we know it will be a wait, my cousin grabs the two that she planned to get, and we hurried into the stuffing line, deciding to look at the accessories afterwards. It's noteworthy to mention that this store had nothing Sonic related, and it especially didn't have Shadow himself. I noticed a couple of kids staring but brushed it off, and once I overheard a mother a ways behind me in line telling her kid that they didn't have Sonic, I honestly didn't think much of it. At this moment, I was sort of holding the stuffingless Shadow in my arms when a random lady walks out of line up to me and grabs his ear tightly. She says to me, "Ma'am, where did you get this?" And me, feeling slightly startled, I said, "Oh, he was online." Now, I wasn't sure what exactly I was expecting, but it sure wasn't for this woman to, in complete silence, step back and glare me down. No words were said, but I've worked in a fast food establishment that had a reputation of being slow, and I had never received a glare harder than this one. I'm still half convinced that this woman was trying to blow up my head with her mind or something like that. I sort of gave her a confused look in response, because I had expected at least a begrudging thanks, though I suppose not everyone was raised on manners. After a solid 30 seconds of her glaring, this woman walked back to her daughter and husband in line, and the entire time, she continued to glare daggers at me, not taking her eyes off of me. Now naturally, I was getting kind of weirded out. This woman was probably in her 40s or something like that, and she was glaring down a girl in her 20s over a Build-A-Bear. I glanced over to my cousin, and I saw that she was returning this dirty look in some kind of attempt to get this lady to stop staring at us. The line moves forward, and it's almost our turn to get the plushie stuffed. Right as we're waiting for our turn, this woman's husband walks right up to us. And yes, she was still glaring us down at this point. He says to me, "Hey, is Shadow for sale? I'll give you $100 right now." I looked at him and I said, no, I'm sorry. He then said to me, "Are you sure? I mean, are you really sure?" And I looked at him again and I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry." The husband then stepped back with a confused expression and returned to his wife and daughter, who, by the way, the wife was now glaring even worse. We got Shadow, Bluey, and Bingo all stuffed, got those little adoption certificate things, and my cousin ended up buying Shadow a wedding dress, as I had told her about the videos of people putting him in dresses, and I thought it was funny. Once we went to pay, we took one last look just to see that this woman was still glaring daggers at us. So we went ahead and paid, and we got out of there. Now, the story is relatively anticlimactic, but I think considering the circumstances, it is still a funny one. It's definitely the first Karen or entitled parent I've encountered out in the wild, which feels way different than encountering them at work. I've told a few friends this story, and they pointed out that she was probably planning to snatch him had I not mentioned that he was already paid for, which honestly is really annoying to think about. Luckily, Shadow is safe at home and well cared for. I'm glad I have him, and I really hope they do a restock of him soon, just so other fans can get him just like I did. Okay, this is one of those situations where I can only imagine being in that scenario, because holy crap, that Karen was 100% gonna rob you. Like, she was staring you down as if you had kicked her dog or something like that. And the fact that the husband came up and was like, "Oh, I'll buy it from you for $100. Are you sure you don't want to do that?" It's like, dude, go away. I don't know you, and I'm not gonna give this over to you. So good for you for standing your ground and not giving these people any chances to steal from you. Because I guarantee you, the second you put down Shadow and look away, that stupid family would have taken him and tried to claim that it was always theirs. And that, in my opinion, would have been devastating to deal with. Am I the jerk for kicking my best friend out of my wedding after she literally threw shade at me and my husband at our reception? Because right now, my friends are split down the middle, and at this point, I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong or not. Here's what happened. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I just got married last weekend, and what was supposed to be the best day of my life turned into a complete disaster because of my best friend, who we will call Emily. Emily and I have been inseparable since college. She was my maid of honor, and I trusted her completely. But looking back, there were so many red flags leading up to my wedding that I just ignored. For starters, she kept making weird comments about how weddings are just a big performance. Secondly, she was oddly obsessed with my fiancé, always joking about how he was the one that got away, which is like, okay, they went on one date years ago before we even met, but that was it. And third, she kept making passive-aggressive remarks about how much I was spending on the wedding, saying that it was excessive. Now, I brushed all all of this off because, well, we've been friends for a decade. But then the wedding happened. Everything was perfect until the reception. Right after dinner, the DJ opened up the floor for speeches. My dad spoke, Jake's brother spoke, and then Emily took the mic, which by the way was completely unplanned. At first it seemed like a sweet speech, but then she started talking about all the versions of love and how sometimes the best love stories don't end in marriage. Then she looked straight at Jake and said, "Some people end up with the person they're meant to be with, others just settle." And I swear the entire room went silent. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, but I could feel his whole body tense. I could hear whispers and people were staring at me. And then she laughed like it was some kind of joke. She actually had the audacity to toast to us after that. But at that point, I saw red. As soon as she stepped down, I pulled her aside and I asked her what in the world that was about. But she played dumb and said, "It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." But I was not having it. I told her she had completely disrespected me on the most important day of my life and that I wanted her gone. She scoffed, said I was overreacting, but I stood my ground and I had one of the groomsmen escort her out. Well, now our mutual friends are split. Some say I was justified because she was clearly being shady, but others think I was too harsh and should have just let it go. So truly, am I the jerk for kicking my best friend out of my wedding after she literally threw shade at me and my husband? Because right now I don't know what to do. No, you are not the jerk. That was so over the line. I honestly don't care who it is. It could have been my mom or dad up there making that speech. The second someone disrespects me and my future spouse like that, all bets are off and they have gotta go. And by the way, that is not something you joke about. You don't stand up there and say, "Oh yeah, you're settling for this lady." And by the way, as a reminder, this is literally at their reception. Like, what's going on right now? That is so inappropriate. Never mind the fact that she's been making weird comments the entire time and clearly has some secret crush on Jake or something like that. But the fact that she vocalized that and basically projected everything that she was thinking out onto the audience and the bride and groom, like that is so crazy and honestly not fair. So no, you're not the jerk for kicking her out. And I really hope this is someone you no longer talk to because this is not a good friend. I mean, just look at the way she tried to brush it off as a joke. And it's like, no, idiot, it's not a joke. You literally meant that. You said it at my wedding and tried to be like, "Oh, I'm just kidding." But there's truth to that. You really mean that. So no, you're not the jerk. And honestly, this lady is not a good friend. And this is definitely not someone that you should ever have to deal with. My mom said that I was selfish for changing my name after I came out as trans to my entire family. And right now she's causing me a lot of grief and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I came out to my mother when I was 22 years old and she did not take it well. This specific scenario happened years ago, but I've been advised before to take stories of my mother to this page as others have felt confident that she fits the entitled parent template and I'm finally acting on that advice. For context, my mother has had the usual negative responses that parents can generally have. She's told me that I turned my back on everything I was raised on, that I was just confused and that Satan was lying to me. And for reference, she is heavily religious. And also, I have nothing wrong with religion, but she is very toxically religious. She even went as far as to tell me that my straight, not safe for work books that I was reading and my Catholic friend brainwashed me into making me trans. And that's just the tamer responses that she had. Also, apparently, after I came out, she has these little index cards with Bible verses and nonsense explanations from her as to how the Bible verse was explaining that I was not actually trans or that I was wrong that I was trans. In this instance, she also blamed my Catholic friend on top of some of my other friends for brainwashing me into believing that I'm trans. Now, just to be clear, my friends never once made any impression on me to be trans. We have never even so much as discussed the idea that I was trans until I brought it up to him. Well, it got to the point where I was comfortable introducing my chosen name to my siblings and such. Of course, I told my mother as well, even though I know that she will never use it. However, it was simply not enough for my mother to not be pressured or expected to use my chosen name. She was also upset that my brother and other people around our apartment complex have chosen to respect my new name. Well, a fight broke out because my little brother has become very much like a trans social justice warrior towards my mother in defense of me. His famous quote being to scream at my mother loud enough for me to hear from the bedroom that my pronouns are he, him. This particular incident, however, my brother seemed very upset that my mother was not using my chosen name as my siblings had all generally started working at switching over how they address me. Even my older brother is making an effort, despite his own unique views that he had at the very least previously used to have. Well, my mother had this whiteboard where she would write messages on it for us right before she leaves for work, generally addressing our chores for the day and so forth. As you can expect, my mother did not use my chosen name on this whiteboard, and that was something I choked down and dealt with as I knew picking the fight with my mother was not worth it. Well, my little brother is a very empathetic individual and knows when something is bothering me. So, beyond my knowledge, he apparently continuously kept changing my name on the board from my dead name to my chosen name, and I was low-key proud of him for being such an ally, but also I figured it was going to come with a lecture on my end. And you know what? I was right. My mom comes into my room later that night to insist that I stop going by my chosen name and to continue using my dead name with everyone. She told me that it was incredibly selfish and inconsiderate of me to change the name that she and my father worked so hard to come up with, and that it took them months to come up with the perfect name for me. Now, my father doesn't seem to care or have any attachment to my name other than the fact that my dead name was named after him and was meant to be the female version of his own name, and even he's agreed to call me Junior as a compromise and still fully accepts that my chosen name is my new name. I have agreed fully to that, and I think the nickname is adorable. My mom also said that I was throwing away the gift that she and my father gave me. Now, also a fun fact story, my dead name was not actually going to be my dead name, but rather another name. The only reason I wasn't named this other name was because my aunt insisted that my cousin, who was going to be due barely a month or two after me, would be named that same name. Well, it turns out neither of us were named under this name, so I have reasons to believe that no, my mother does not actually care about my dead name itself either, and rather was only caring about me changing my name because I was changing it as a trans man. And while this is just the tip of the iceberg with this woman, I'm honestly at a place where I seriously don't know what to do. Man, I'm really sorry that your mom's treating you that way because this situation and whole scenario is not easy to go through. I have friends and family who are trans and have come out in some kind of form, and I can tell you right now that that process is not easy. People can walk away from you, they can abandon you, and in some cases, they can straight up just deny that you're a member of the family. And that is so messed up. I can't imagine doing that to someone that you love. So truly, I hope this all works out for you because the way your mom's acting, in my opinion, is incredibly unkind. My entitled ex is demanding child support payments for a kid that isn't even mine. And worst of all, my mother and sister are on their side. And I honestly don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Some years ago, I dated a girl, and the relationship was just bad. She was very controlling and very abusive. It ended up really bad and we just broke up. I kept on going with my life, and after some years, I got a decent job. And this job was enough to solve all my needs. And now I have a comfortable life, and I'm able to save some of my money. The thing is, a couple of months after getting my job, my ex contacted me, and at first, all she wanted to do was talk. I believe that she may want to reconnect or something, but she showed up with a 5-year-old child claiming that he was my son and demanded child support. I didn't believe her, but her child's age matched up when we cut off contact. I got advice from a lawyer to try and solve this out of court, so I offered to take responsibility and pay all the costs and being an active partner of the kid's life, only after making a DNA test. Everyone was okay with this except for my ex. She acted offended. She then demanded that I just give her the money that she deserved. She used all the excuses that she could, even contacting my family and telling them that I was trying to avoid taking responsibility for her child. When she ran out of excuses and the DNA test was finally made, much to nobody's surprise, I'm not the father. She was so mad with the results and cried about the money, saying it was unfair and that she deserved it, but she didn't accomplish anything. Fast forward to last week, there was a little party at my parents' house. My brother, a friend, and I were talking, and my brother started to joke about the situation with my ex. My friend and I started to joke about it too, and some of our comments were a little bit dark and bad, but we were far away from the rest of the people, literally on the opposite side of the house, so nobody else could hear us. At least that's what we thought. We were just laughing like crazy when my sister appeared very angry and pushed me against the wall. She spied us and heard the conversation, and she was very mad. She then started to yell at us about how terrible of people we were for mocking a poor woman. A few hours later, when the party ended, she asked me to go to the kitchen with our parents, and she started to say how awful I was for the previous situation. Apparently, my ex had been in contact with her, and she believed her version of the story, and that this was her way of having some kind of intervention. My brother and I were like, "Are you serious? You can't be serious, right?" Especially when she started to say how I forced my ex into being a single mother, and that apparently I had a moral obligation to help her out. My dad only said that maybe we were being too cruel making jokes about her, and that I wasn't responsible for that kid. My mom then surprised all of us when she said, "Even if the kid is not yours, you are making more than enough money to support that child. You should have helped her out." Since then, I have been receiving text messages from my dad and my brother who are on my side saying I'm not responsible for her, but my sister is telling me how horrible I am for basically ruining her life. My mom only said, "Well, It's your decision and I respect it. I'm just very disappointed that you ended up being so selfish. I'm aware that she doesn't deserve money and I'm not planning to give her any, but the constant harassment from my sister trying to guilt trip me into giving money to my crazy ex-girlfriend is honestly just exhausting. Your mom and sister are giant pieces of garbage, as well as your ex-girlfriend. All of them collectively giant pieces of garbage. The fact that they would try and guilt trip you into giving money to your ex, who is very clearly just trying to steal money out of your pocket, is disgusting. I'm honestly surprised you didn't go back to him with a DNA test, shove it in their face and say, here you go, the kid's not mine. Like legitimately, you do not owe that lady any money. She clearly only came back to you because you have a well-paying job and all your needs are being met. She literally only wanted you for money. So I don't blame you for stepping back and saying, hey, I don't owe you anything. And as for the jokes at this lady's expense, honestly, if I was in this situation, I probably would be doing the same thing. Humor's a great way of coping with stressful situations, and obviously these were made in private, and it's not like he was posting this all over social media or something. It was literally amongst his friends and his brother, which also begs the question, why was this sister eavesdropping in the shadows, trying to figure out what's going on? Like, in my opinion, I think it's time to distance yourself from your mom and your sister, because clearly they're on your ex's side, which in my opinion is just ridiculous. And I seriously can't believe that your mom's like, you already make enough money, you should just give her money anyways. That's such a toxic thing to say, like as if you didn't work hard enough already just to get the job that you have and the money that you currently have as well. So in my opinion, I would ignore them completely and keep moving forward with your life. And you're going to enjoy that life because you won't have to make child support payments for a kid that isn't even yours. My boyfriend's depression is slowly starting to make my depression even worse, especially since he refuses to accept that he is depressed. And now I'm considering breaking up with him because of this, and I'm not sure what to do. I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years now. We've been through a lot together and have been facing with more than our fair share of issues, especially financial ones. When I first met my boyfriend, he had debts, huge ones at that. He first didn't want to share it with me and asked me for help behind fake stories. We broke up shortly because of the lying and then got back together, but I've never really been able to fully trust him ever since then. I did help him with his financial situation to the point where I'm today in the same situation with debts. I lost my job, I'm having a really hard time finding a new one, and it's the same situation for him. For 3 years, we've been together through a lot. I had business partners stealing from me, we had accidents with a lot to pay, we had a flooding that we needed to deal with, my card had been hacked, the list goes on. I've always had a tendency to fall into depression, and with all that's been going on, I think I'm hitting my limits. I do see a therapist, but this depression episode is the worst ever, and I can't stop crying and so on. The thing is, my boyfriend is also depressed because of all of this, and rightfully so, but his reaction to this is sleeping, waiting for things to get done like cooking or cleaning, and he is so irritable that it's a pain to even talk to him, which he doesn't even want to do that anymore. He considers his situation to be a lot worse because he compares himself to me and considers me Wonder Woman, assuming that I can deal with everything. Because of our financial issue, we have been considering living with my parents. My family is just the best. They're super helpful and they offered this to us. But I know that his attitude will never be appreciated by my parents and that it will likely embarrass me very badly. The overall situation is just draining me emotionally. He has no family and no friends in the country, so I feel responsible for him, but I feel like my only exit is for me to go back and live with my parents alone. But I know that for him, it will be the last big hit and that he will not be able to manage it. We had a talk tonight about the situation, and once more, he just doesn't acknowledge the fact that it is very visible that he's depressed and might need to get into therapy. He is then coming to me to try and make me laugh and change my mood, but I don't want us to bury our head in the sand any longer and ignore this. If he were willing to address the situation, I would be his support without question, but I'm honestly at a loss. I'm thinking that maybe our common depression might be a red flag that this is just not supposed to work out. What should I do? This is definitely a tricky situation because you have a full awareness that yeah, you struggle with depression, but your boyfriend is not willing to admit it, which can probably be very frustrating in this relationship. You can see the writing on the wall, you can see the symptoms and all the things going on and stuff like that, and he just is not ready to accept that, which is fine. And if you're not compatible in that way and it's causing problems with your relationship, then this is definitely something you need to reevaluate. And I don't think there's any harm in thinking about yourself in this situation. So hopefully this all works out for you, and hopefully your boyfriend is at least able to find the help that he needs, because it sounds like he needs it, especially considering all the things that both of you have been through. I have been ignored for a year by my husband, and I just found out why, and now I don't know what to do. I'm a 35-year-old female, and I've been married to my husband for 8 years. And my husband has been very distant for well over a year now. I have tried over and over to talk to him, to get him to open up to me, but he keeps telling me that we'll talk later. But later just doesn't happen. He keeps me shut out completely. I am a stay-at-home mom. We have 2 kids, both under 7 years old, that he does not pay attention to. He doesn't help with any chores. He doesn't help with the kids. Whenever they try to get his attention, or even try just to talk to him, he gets really irritated. And then he ends up yelling at them just to leave him alone, and leaves the room anytime any one of us comes into it just to see him. I honestly feel like I'm living with a stranger. When he comes home from work, he goes straight to his computer and spends all of his time on it. If he's off from work, he's on his computer literally all day. He left his computer open and I looked at it. I understand that it's an invasion of privacy, and I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I found out that he's been looking at a lot of inappropriate pictures online, if you know what I mean. I also found out that he's been sending some DMs with some other people where they were talking about possibly meeting up, but he hasn't responded yet. And he even went as far as to look up and find out that this person he was messaging lives in our city. I am so devastated that he's trying to have another relationship outside of our marriage. We are not in an open marriage, and this isn't the first time where he secretly tried to meet up with someone. A couple of years ago, he met up with a woman who he was interested in the guise of trying to do an art project with her, and got shut down when he realized she was just trying to be nice and wanted nothing to do with him. I don't know if he's met up with any more people from the first time that he did it, but after these DMs with this other person, I'm just not sure. I honestly don't know what to do. I don't know how to go about talking about it with him. I'm just so sick to my stomach about all of it, and I'm at a loss of how to proceed. Well, it sounds like your husband is basically going behind your back to try and meet up with another woman, which is completely inappropriate. And it sounds like he's tried this once before, but it failed miserably. And now it sounds like he's found somebody who could possibly make this happen, which is terrible for you and your kids. He is literally throwing your marriage out the window, and that is not fair for you. So in my opinion, I think it's time to talk to a divorce attorney. The last thing I'm going to do is tell you whether you should or shouldn't get divorced. That's none of my business. But from the outside looking in, I would take the steps necessary to secure some kind of future for you as well as your kids. It might be time for you to step up and do what you can to protect them. He's mistreating and yelling at your kids, and he's treating you like garbage. Your children are going to have a lifetime of wondering why their dad walked out on them, and they're going to need a parent who actually cares and that is actually going to be there for them. So it's time to step up and think about the future of your children, because your husband has made a very clear choice that he wants to try and mess around while you're married, and that's honestly only going to cause problems in this relationship. My sister blocked me because I wouldn't cancel my plans just to see her and her son, and now I don't know what to do. The title says it all. My sister blocked me because I had other plans, and I couldn't come visit her and my nephew. First, some backstory. I am in the military, and I come home to visit about once a year. My sister has some behavioral and mental health issues. I am home visiting for 2 weeks. I have a big family and a good amount of friends. I try to see everyone I can while I'm here, and I always end up driving hours and hours out of the day trying to see everyone while I'm in town, because even though I drove over 1,000 miles to come here, I'm still the one that has to travel everywhere to see everyone that's here. My sister has a baby boy. My nephew's almost 1 year old. I met him in real life for the first time while I've been here. I've gone to see him twice. One time, I even left a family reunion early to see him, and I arrived to a family event on the other side late just so I could see him again. There were people I wouldn't be able to see if I didn't come to these events. I had a great time and I had a lot of fun. Today, I have plans to meet in real life with another group of people that I game with daily and have been for the past 3 years. We've been planning this for months, and today is the only day everyone's schedules match up. We're all going to a restaurant and I have to pick up 2 of them on the way. My sister suddenly messaged me out of nowhere asking me if I would be able to come and visit her. I explained that I had plans and I unfortunately could not, but after I said that, she blew up on me and said that she doesn't want to see me again before I leave. And then she blocked me and isn't answering any of my text messages either. At this point, I don't know what to do. I'm definitely not going to cancel my plans, but I feel like absolute trash now. She knows exactly how to make me feel bad in the worst possible ways. I also struggle with depression and see a therapist regularly. How do I best approach my sister to try and get her to understand and maybe try to calm her down? I leave in 3 days and I don't want to leave like this. What should I do? Your sister's being very manipulative. She's using your depression and your anxiety against you. At this point, she has to know that you're here on limited time. You don't have all the time in the world to see people, and you plan this event with your friends months in advance. So for you to just give that up all of a sudden and say, hey, I'm gonna go see my sister instead, would be very insulting to the people that you planned with. And honestly, the fact that your sister doesn't understand that is definitely her problem. This is not your problem in the slightest. So I honestly would not feel bad about this situation. And you said it yourself, she knows exactly how to make you feel bad in the worst possible way. So I just would not allow her to use these tactics just to make you feel like garbage so that you can bend to her will. Because that's exactly what she's doing from my perspective. So if I was in your shoes, I would go about with my plans just like normal and ignore this temper tantrum. Because you already have plans. And if she can't understand that, like legitimately, then that is her problem, not yours. My stepdad is in love with me, and I don't know what to do. I'm 22 years old, and I've had my stepdad around for about 12 years now, and I'm at a point where I'm pretty sure he's in love with me. This is a very intense assumption, but I'm not a delusional woman that likes the drama that comes with such attention. He has been diagnosed with MS, a form of Parkinson's recently, and he only has a couple of years left to live. With this diagnosis, his behavior has been more apparent in contrast than within the past couple of years, because I've always had a suspicion. He has his own kids, 4 of them in fact, and I have 3 sisters, and his attention has always gravitated towards me. My mother and my stepdad don't share any kids. Also, I'm the youngest. He's a shy man who keeps to himself, but in slick ways, he has always made it apparent that I'm his favorite. This was usually made clear through my mother as well. She has made comments on how he always talks to me, how proud he is of me, and how beautiful and smart I am, which can be seen at face value as pretty innocent for the most part. But my mom is a very accommodating woman. She goes along with him to please him, and I'm pretty sure it just goes right over her head. But it goes even further. He texts me unusual stuff sometimes. He mentions how he sometimes stares at my profile picture just to admire me. He calls me his princess, his little one, and many other things that come off as flirtatious. He never does this when anyone else is around, so usually it's just over text messaging. I'm certain of a fact that he doesn't call his own kids or my sisters anything similar. He only does this with my mother as well, but he is not even that direct or flirtatious with her. It's bizarre. He's a simple, unromantic man, so this is something that he doesn't even do in his own relationship, so it makes me question why he's doing this to me. Recently, he saw me wearing one of his old sweaters he gave my mom because I was cold, and when he got home, he text messaged me and said that he loves seeing me wearing his clothes, which I didn't know how to respond. Over the years, he was planning to immigrate to Canada, and he had always made the comment, but only if the little ones come along with us. And he was very serious about it as well, looking for universities for me and making plans for my paperwork even before I even agreed on joining them, which isn't that weird overall, but I'm a grown woman, and he doesn't need for me to just tag along like I'm a kid that's dependent on him. If I was still underage, sure, that's understandable. If that were the case, then yes, they should take care of me and think of me, but that isn't the current situation. My other sister also still lives at home, and he never had the intention to take her as well, which made it apparent he only wanted me to go with them. To make the situation even weirder, he once made the comment, as well as the joke I'm assuming, basically suggesting that we just leave my mother behind and that me and him just move away together. My mother wasn't present, and it felt like the joke had a hidden meaning. He was very pushy about it and never truly asked me to do that, but simply made the assumption that I wanted to go with them. And in the rare moments that I'm alone with him, the tensions between us become very high in the household. He doesn't live with us, and he never has, so I usually see him on the weekends when he comes to pick my mom up. But when we, my mother and I, or my sister and I, had arguments, I was usually the one to walk away to go to my room. He would then come to my room to ease the tension and try to fix it. One time, I was having an argument with my sister. I was sitting on my balcony, and he came to talk to me. After some conversation, I got emotional, which I rarely am. I cried and he comforted me, which is also very rare because it's not often that I'm vulnerable in front of another. He hugged me, which also never happens because I'm not an affectionate person, but I just accepted it because at the time I feel like he meant well. When he pulled away, he stared into my eyes and cupped my face. It was at night and we couldn't see each other that clearly, but I could swear on everything he had the intention to kiss me. I felt overwhelmed. I pulled away and started the conversation almost instantaneously to ease the awkwardness, and after that happened, I never spoke up about it. I'm a very private person, so I rarely speak about my love life, but on the rare occasion that I do, I usually get comments like, like, "Oh, you are such a pretty and smart woman." And then he'll basically say that I should have a man like him. I have many other things to push my point, but to come to the question, he lives further away from us. But because of his condition, he wants to move, which I don't look forward to at all. He wants to get an apartment on the same street as us just to be close to my mom so that she can take care of him. This is understandable, but last night I got a text message that he had only sent to me and not my sister or my mother, going on about how he's doing this to be close to me, and so I can easily come visit him before his condition becomes, well, unfortunate. I think this diagnosis is fading away his morals, and he is getting more outspoken about his feelings for me because of it. But I can't talk to my mother about this. I simply can't. I would not be able to tolerate him living so close by. He would expect a lot of attention, and it would make me very anxious. He is a very egotistical man, besides him being kind, and would take it as an offense, especially given the circumstances. His feelings for me are strange and inappropriate, but I would get nothing out of it to speak up about them. I can tolerate it, but only if he lives as far away as he does now. I'm honestly at a loss, and I don't know what to do. This is a terrible situation to be stuck in, but my automatic thought when I was reading through this was that maybe you need to move. Like, if this guy really is trying to make advances on you, then you need to get away from him. And I think you definitely need to talk to your mom about this. You need to share that text message and say, "Hey, this is what's going on," and then explain to her that you feel very uncomfortable around him. Also, the original poster is 22 years old. Moving out and finding an apartment with some kind of roommate situation is possible. And under no circumstances, in my opinion, if he's acting this way, should you ever be alone with him ever again. It's not appropriate, he's being weird, and there's no reason for you to put yourself in that situation. So I think now's the time for you to start taking steps to move yourself out and move yourself away from this man, because his behavior is incredibly inappropriate, and you absolutely do not have to put up with that. My entitled nephews break into my shed and rob me blind, but when I confronted their parents about this, they dismissed me and blew me off. So I went to the police and I had them arrested. Here's what happened. About midway through last week, when I came home from work, I noticed my shed door was open, and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken as well. I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. My friends and I tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year, and I was going to cash them in at a recycling place soon because I like big payouts. At the place I was going to go to, it's about 10 cents a can. But there was more than just my bags of cans missing from the shed too. I was also missing my gardening shears, my steel rake, my shovels, as well as 2 full gallons of gasoline. I also lost my power drill that was like $5, so I hope it was worth it, as well as an electric hedge trimmer and a small electric chainsaw that I also used. But whoever broke into this didn't touch my lawnmower, weed whacker, extension cords, as well as several other items that they just blatantly left alone, and I have no idea why they took what they did. I guess maybe whoever did this broke in thinking that they could resell it or something. So I went to my security cameras, and lo and behold, it was my nephews. All 3 of these entitled teenagers broke into my shed using one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognize the hammer because it's a bright yellow and black one, and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash the cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand, and then they came back with shopping carts that I'm guessing that they also stole. It took them a few trips to get all of the cans, and they didn't even bother to try and close the door when they were done. And with this evidence in hand, I went to my sister and my brother-in-law, and at first, before I could show them anything, they denied that their kid stole anything from me. So I decided to surprise them with security footage that they had no idea about. In fact, I've had to put up cameras before because of their kids. This is not an isolated incident, and this is not the first time that they've robbed me blind. It started with foods and snacks, and then these little thieves moved on to DVDs and video games. Then, after they got their grubby hands on all of that, they would basically take anything they could get their hands on. And anytime I made them return my stuff that they had stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy. And then I got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble either from their parents. The final straw happened last year when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 6-packs of my favorite blood orange beer from my fridge. They used my spare hidden key just to get into my home. And guess what? When I went to my brother-in-law and my sister and talked to him about this, all they said was, "Oh, well, boys will be boys." And this is where things got interesting. When my sister and brother-in-law saw the camera footage of my nephews stealing from me, they seemed furious. But in all actuality, they were more angry that their boys skipped school than they were of them stealing from me. They had spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle well drop and cashing in my cans. And they used that money to buy video games and junk food. The money that they got amounted to nearly $200. With that and the destroyed padlock, I told my sister and brother-in-law that they now owed me over $200. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry at their kids to then making excuses for them, and then to being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I go to the police and I press charges. At that point, they had had enough, so they told me to get out, and I said that they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. I ended up getting back everything that my nephew stole from me. But over the next couple of days, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone with tons of messages. At first, they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays, and they have 3 kids and a mortgage, again, repeating the same line. They then started gaslighting me, which then progressed to them threatening me. And all of this would go on a repeat cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages on their own, which were all just more fake apologies and more gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger. So I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to the police seriously, all because we were family. When I spoke with my sister and brother-in-law, they refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did, even when I tried to give suggestions that maybe they sell off the video game so that I can get my money back. It just simply was not enough. Then they had the audacity to say that I had actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, I'm the devil snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans, basically enticing them to cash it in for money. So at that point, I had just about enough, and I decided that was it. I went to the police station that morning and I filed the report. I gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock that they smashed. I showed them all of the text messages, which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. Not too long after that, my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. The police came to their house and my sister and brother-in-law were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently, all 3 of my nephews went from being cocky little brats to crying like babies when they were being put in handcuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with, that's sort of friends with my sister, was there to see it happen. And shortly after the arrest, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail till Monday morning, and now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously, as there has been complaints about my nephews for some time, but nothing was proven until now. Apparently, over the past few months, bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area, and while I don't know if it's my nephews or not, they most definitely now are likely suspects. And with word spreading of their arrest, let's hope other neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. As you could probably guess, my sister and brother-in-law showed up at my house. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they are enablers who refuse to hold their kids accountable for their actions. And when I said that, that just made them scream and pound on my door more, till I threatened to call the police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it by now. So they left without any more trouble, but they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or my brother-in-law. Instead, I decided to save all of the messages they send me because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money and have already replaced the damaged padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end, I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to mess with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this. My cousins, my aunts, my parents, everybody. They're all supporting me in this because my nephews have stolen from them too. And after banning my nephews from my house, some of them have done the same. I'm going to push for my nephews to get community service. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know they'll hate that the most. Whenever they are made to do any kind of work, they don't want to do it. They just stand around griping and act like the whole world is against them. So hardly anything ever gets done. Perhaps a few hundred hours of unpaid work will teach them some manners. They've been spoiled for far too long. Honestly, you did these kids a big favor, because what starts out as soda cans and gardening tools soon becomes something seriously illegal. And based on the way things are being described, these parents also need to be taught a lesson, because the way they're acting is so inappropriate. It's absolutely ridiculous to protect your kid over something like this and not allow the consequences to come their way. And if they had just paid back the original poster, all of this could have been avoided, but they wanted to be stubborn. So you know what? At the end of the day, what goes around comes around, and these nephews absolutely had it coming. I no longer want to have kids with my wife, and I don't know how to discuss this with her or where to even start. My wife of 3 years and I had intended to have children shortly after marriage. The pandemic interrupted that idea, and it wasn't until the start of this year that we decided to try again. It wasn't long until she did end up pregnant, but it turned sour a few months in. I was ready for her to be more irritable and need a lot of help, but I wasn't ready to be shouted at on a daily basis and insulted over every little disagreement. The one time I put my foot down and told her, for example, that I'm not going back to the store to get a specific snack when our pantry was full of food, in retaliation, she threw a can of soda at my head. After that, I packed my bags and I went to visit my brother for a few days. 2 days in, she calls me and tells me that she had a miscarriage. It was a terrible situation and she was an absolute mess. I go back to the house and she's sitting there sobbing and telling me she's sorry for everything she did and that losing our child was her fault for being so terrible. Over the last month, we've been working to recover from the loss and rebuilding our marriage. She's mostly back to the same wonderful person I married, and I believe her behavior really was based on pregnancy hormones. My brother, though, isn't convinced and wanted me to stay with him, but I couldn't bring myself to abandon my wife after miscarrying. The problem I have now is my wife is talking about trying for a kid again. I have forgiven her for the behavior before, but I am not willing to go through that again. For me, kids are no longer an option between us as far as I see it, but I don't know how to express this without sounding confrontational and controlling. I do want to stay married with my wife. This one short time aside, she has been an amazing partner in so many ways, and I don't want to throw that away. But I don't want her to get pregnant ever again though, and I know that's a lot to ask. If she agrees, I'll propose that we both get sterilized to be extra sure and fair. Does that sound reasonable? Is there some other approach that I should take? What should I do? I think being honest and open with your wife and saying, hey, I don't want kids anymore would really be the best thing to say, and you probably need to be ready for whatever reaction you do get from her, because there is a chance that she probably will not want to be married with you anymore, and that's just something you have to be ready for. But saying out loud as well as posting that you do not want kids is, in my opinion, a very responsible thing to own up to, because the irresponsible thing would be to have a few kids and then realizing after the fact that no, I actually don't want kids. Knowing that you don't want kids up front, despite how your wife is gonna feel about it, is very responsible in my opinion. But I think if anything, couples counseling would probably be a very good step for both of you. It sounds like some underlying issues might be going on here, and it might be in your best interest to look into that. My girlfriend is not honoring our debt agreement, and at this point, I don't know what to do. My girlfriend and I have been together for 3 years. She is a very kind, wonderful person, but she's a workaholic, as well as a former alcoholic, 11 years sober, and I'm also 2 years sober. COVID was hard on us. We had just spent most of our savings to move across the country, and we were both laid off early after getting a pretty nice place, because at the time, we were making good money. I'm happy to say we are well situated now, having both gotten even better jobs than before, and even bought a house together before interest rates skyrocketed. But before I was sober, I wasn't great with money. I've since gotten much better, but I had racked up about $14,000 in credit card debt. When we went on unemployment, the interest was very expensive. My kind girlfriend opened a joint account with 0% interest for 24 months, and so we transferred the debt over to save me on interest. Fast forward to when we both have jobs in January of 2022, and we're in therapy for a bunch of other reasons. She says she wants to be paid back, so we keep separate finances and put anything we split into Splitwise, which is an app that tracks who owes what. We both like it and it works really well for us. So I suggest we put all $14,000 into Splitwise. I'll cover the next $28,000 of household expenses, and she can use the money that she saves to pay down the debt, to which she agrees. So for the next 8 months, I cover all household expenses. I even got a second job just to help out, and I successfully paid down the debt. A little bit of background before we go any further. Her father is terminally ill. I noticed a lot of boxes showing up at the house during this time, with clothing, shoes, bags, and other stuff almost every day. I wanted to say something, but we're both very hands-off with how each other spends their money, and figured it was none of my business. She's very sensitive to me telling her how to do things, or inquiring about stuff like that. So I paid down the debt, and I'm pretty proud of myself. And I find out afterwards that she didn't pay down a single cent of it. She then accuses me of tricking her, misleading her, and not actually paying down the debt, apparently because I didn't give her any cash. I I make a spreadsheet of all of the expenses I had covered. Meals, insurance, mortgage payments, car payments, all things that she would have had to pay if I hadn't covered them. But it doesn't sway her at all. She insists I still owe her for the debt. Well, she sort of comes around and recognizes it's her debt now. But we have other debt. Since we were both unemployed for 14 months, we racked up a large back rent bill. Also because we got into a fight with the landlord because the place was not up to code according to the city and was declared uninhabitable. We had lots of problems that he never fixed. I had to hire attorneys after we moved, and through a lot of hard work on my part, negotiated the debt down to 50%. So far, I've been paying off this debt myself as part of the debt that I owe her, but now it was supposed to be her time to start contributing 50%. Naturally, she's saying I should just assume all payments for that debt, which is still about $20,000, since according to her, I didn't actually pay her back for the other debt. And at this point, I'm just at a loss. I worked very hard, like I said, getting a second job, just so I could pay her back for what I owed her, because she made it clear that was important. She could check any time she wanted in the application and see that the debt was being paid down and by how much. I'm flabbergasted that she would now accuse me of not paying it down and demanding that I take on this other debt. It makes me feel so distant from her, and I feel very hurt. How can I approach her and get her to understand? For context, she came from a very poor family, which has entirely shaped her way of thinking about money. She's a penny pincher to the max. I came from wealth and privilege, and I recognize that. And I have an abundance mentality. I don't put anything under $50 on our expense tracking app, but in contrast, she will put down $3 iTunes rental fees into the app. Honestly, since it's not a massive sum of money, like I said, we both do really well, I am just going to be leaning towards just paying it off, as long as she agrees to stop complaining and fighting me over this. It's all so painful and is doing lasting damage to the relationship, but if I do, I know I will resent her for it. What should I do? It seems like you made this way more complicated than you need to. Like, I don't know why you decided to group your debts all together and mix your finances together. I think that honestly was where your first problem is. Also, you didn't get anything in writing, so of course she can say, nope, you owe me more, because there's nothing in writing and there's just bank statements. Which, by the way, how is that not enough to prove that you've been paying stuff? Like, your girlfriend doesn't sound like she's at all caring about the money that you've already paid. So in my opinion, I think it's time to separate your finances, because otherwise you very well could owe her more money somehow. And I seriously think that's the last thing that anybody wants. My mother-in-law has been living with us for the past 2 years, and I don't know how to get her out of our house. My mother-in-law and her husband lived originally in mainland China. Her husband passed away suddenly, and my Chinese wife invited her to come and live with us. And I accepted, thinking it would be a temporary thing, and also a way to thank her for the donation she provided for the condo's down payment that we're currently living in. And then suddenly the pandemic happened, and except for a short 2-month period, my mother-in-law has been living with us since the summer of 2019. While our apartment is modern, it only has 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. We do have 2 kids, and we live on top of each other right now. We frequently have bathroom issues. We've even had an instance where one of my kids has gone to the bathroom on the floor because my mother-in-law has been in the bathroom for an eternity. Worse of all, I don't speak Mandarin or Chinese, and she is not learning English. I tolerated this during the pandemic because there was no travel possible, but now that the pandemic is finished, I find this less and less tolerable. I have tried multiple times discussing with my wife exactly how I've never accepted the situation, but she has not given up anything or really listened to me in the first place. The situation is good for her because she gets to be close to her mother. Her mom also cooks half the time, as well as cleans up the house, so she really doesn't have to do any chores. The truth of the matter is, her mom has an absurd amount of control on her daughter. She treats her as if my wife is still 12 years old, and that she can dictate exactly how things should be. Apart from the obvious bathroom issue and the lack of space, the biggest truth is that her mom is putting distance between us. Before we were quite close, and now she's spending most of her time with her mom. If this continues, I'll actually become the odd one out of the family. Since we have kids together, I don't want any breakup or any marriage issues. How would you approach this if you were in my situation? Would you take the harder route and just tell your wife that it's unacceptable and that her mom needs to go? Or would you do a soft approach? I'm looking to have some kind of one-on-one with my wife this weekend, and I really could use the advice. What should I do? If I was in your shoes, I definitely would have this conversation with my wife. I would explain to her exactly how I feel. I would explain to her that I was okay with your mother-in-law moving in, and we have made accommodations considering her circumstances, circumstance, but I did not agree to her staying for 2 years. Our apartment is too small for this many people, we're climbing over each other, and our kids are having to go to the bathroom on the floor just because she's hogging the bathroom. That's not okay. And I think if you just explain it and lay it out exactly how it is, you can hopefully show your wife that yeah, some changes need to be made. I think in the worst case scenario, it might be time to look for a house. You have a lot of people living in a small apartment, and I don't think that's very fair for you or anybody living there. So if anything, maybe it's time to look for something bigger. Today, I messed up by putting anime stickers on my phone case, and boy do I regret it. For reference, my friends last year came into school with a lot of, how do you say, provocative anime girl stickers. We all laughed our heads off while shuffling through all of them, each one of us stealing a couple from the pile. Now, I didn't want my family or any of my teachers to see my new stash, so I slipped off my phone case, put the stickers in, along with a drawing a friend of mine had made me, and a sweet note from another friend I had in there, and closed my phone back up. Fast forward a year, and this morning I was a bit frazzled due to other school obligations, which caused me to be pretty careless with my phone, leaving it behind. I only realized this halfway through my 4th period, after I had some time to waste, wanting to pull out my phone and mindlessly scroll as I waited to be dismissed. Of course, I couldn't find it in the typical pouch I leave it in, or anywhere in my bag after dumping everything out. Confused, I went back onto my laptop and used Google's Find My Phone feature to try and figure out if I maybe left it on the bus or in a previous class. After realizing it was in the same building as my locker, I sighed out of relief as I had been at my locker that morning. I would just go to my locker quickly before heading to the cafeteria. I only had another period after this one, so it wasn't too bad of a wait. I was only about 30 minutes into my class period before lunch when I received a very ominous email from my school's dean. It said, "I believe I have located your phone. Please come to my room to retrieve it." And of course, at this moment, I started to panic, as I honestly thought that it was in my locker, but apparently it wasn't, and now our school's dean had it. My mind kept jumping on the same question. How did they know this was my phone? I have a pretty generic lock screen with a passcode, and nothing on my case indicates whose phone this is. After retrieving my phone, I turned it on to check any new notifications I had. I then turned my phone over, noticing a change. The drawing my friend had drew of me typically poked out of the camera hole just a little bit, leaving a little white piece of paper just under the camera. Confused, I popped open my phone case and noticed the trinkets inside had been mixed around, including those scandalous anime lady stickers. And that's when it hit me. The dean absolutely saw the stickers, every single one of them, and I could not be more embarrassed. This is really embarrassing, but there are a few silver linings to take from this. First off, you got your phone back, which is a big deal. It would be worse if you didn't get it back and you just couldn't find it. But also, at least you hid the stickers. It would be another thing if it was all over your phone. That would have been incredibly awkward otherwise. So it's not totally the end of the world. At least you kept your secret hidden. An entitled man loses his mind when a paramedic parks in his parking spot, demanding that he move right away. And after I refused, this man got violent. So the police intervened and they tased him. Here's what happened. So I am a paramedic in a place that has some HOAs and apartment complexes. We hate responding to the apartment complexes because there is nothing but assigned parking and no fire zones. Basically, if we can't find a space to fit in, we have to block the road. My agency also uses first responder vehicles and ambulances. The first responder, as implied, usually arrives first, so we do our best to leave room for the ambulance to fit right in. We get a call at the apartment complex I am in the first responder. As I pull up to the address, by some miracle, there is a spot only 2 apartments away, and I think to myself, great, I can now leave the road clear for the ambulance. But as soon as I park my car, an entitled man starts screaming that I can't park there. I look at him and I have this look on my face, basically to say, are you serious right now? And I just tell him that this is a medical emergency. But he says that he doesn't care and that I can't park there. Keep in mind, my vehicle has enough lights to make a Christmas tree jealous. I just grab my stuff, lock the vehicle, and keep going. That's when this entitled man starts screaming that he's gonna call the cops. I tell him they are already on their way, since they respond to medical emergencies. The cops get there while I'm in with the patient and tell him basically to get lost. But when the cop enters the apartment where the medical emergency is happening, this entitled man has a full-blown breakdown. He enters the apartment and comes into the room where I am treating the patient. He then starts ranting and raving about how I have to move my vehicle right now. I look at the cop and I say, get him out of here. The cop then seals his fate. She asks the patient if she wants wants the person removed from the apartment and asked her if she ever did give consent for him to enter. The patient's response was no, get him out of here. He's trespassing. And that is all that cop needed to hear. The cop then gives him one last chance and tells him to leave or he will be arrested. But this entitled man doubles down. He starts screaming, I am on the HOA board. I can go where I please. At this point, backup is called in and the cop manhandles him out of the room. The ambulance arrives at the same time as the police department backup and they get him out of the apartment so we can safely remove the patient having the medical emergency. I'm not entirely sure what happened next as I was in the back of the ambulance, but when I got out, one of the officers approached us and said, I'm really sorry, but we need another bus. We had to tase him. The policy for the police department is that if they have to tase someone, they have to be transported to the hospital by ambulance. That way the taser spikes can be surgically removed if necessary. So after waiting a little bit for the second ambulance to arrive, we all departed from there and went our separate ways. I found out a few weeks later he was charged with trespassing, assaulting an officer, resisting arrest, as well as interfering with government administration, which is also known as interfering with the scene of an emergency, all over a parking spot that I would have been in for less than 20 minutes if he himself hadn't created all these problems. What an absolute nut job. What kind of person would break into another person's apartment and then start screaming at a paramedic just because they parked temporarily in your spot? I mean, how entitled do you actually have to be to act like that? It's unbelievable, and you know what? This guy got exactly what he deserved. Because being on the HOA board does not give you any kind of authority over someone else's private property, and that does not mean you can go wherever you want. So hopefully next time he thinks twice before he tries to interfere with a medical emergency. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for making my girlfriend choose between me or her childhood best friend? I know this sounds bad, but hear me out. This story takes place about 4 years back when I was dating this girl who we will call Sarah. Sarah is not her real name. I met Sarah my junior year of high school and I decided to ask her out. We dated for about a year and then we broke up due to a misunderstanding, but later worked it out and got back together. But in those months we were broken up, her childhood friend came into the picture. While we were broken up, Sarah and her childhood friend were friends with benefits, and I didn't have any problem with that since we were broken up at the time. But once we got back together, she told him, and they suddenly stopped, and the childhood friend wasn't happy about that. He did not like me, and it was quite clear. When I wasn't around, he would talk badly about me to her, and when I would leave her apartment for the night, he would show up not even 5 minutes later. I had my suspicions that they were still fooling around, and when I confronted both of them about what was going on, she denied it. But he would go completely unhinged, screaming about how dare I accuse him of such a thing, which only made my suspicions grow more. Eventually, it got to the point where if I would offer to take her out on a date night, he would get upset and do everything he could to try and get her to not go out, just so he could ruin what we had planned. And at this point, I really hit my breaking point. He had been really controlling towards her and making her have second thoughts about me and trying to keep me away from her. At this point, I put my foot down, and for the first time in our relationship, I freaked out on her, and I shouted in her face, saying that he was getting in the way of our relationship. I'm not proud of it, and I didn't want to force her to choose, but I saw no other choice. I told her he needs to go or I will. She went silent, but eventually said she would make him leave. And he did, but a few months later, he came back like nothing ever happened. I talked to her asking why, and she gave some excuse along the lines of, oh, he's having a hard time and he came to me. I couldn't just leave him. I decided to let it slide, thinking maybe her pushing him away got the message through to him to not mess with our relationship. Well, I was wrong. After a month of him being back, he started the usual pattern again, and the same situations happened over again. Eventually, I confronted her again at her apartment. He was there, of course, and I told him that I needed to talk to Sarah and that he needed to leave. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, no, I think I'll stay right here. I wanted to retaliate so badly, but I simply screamed at him, it's between me and her. Get out. He groaned and stepped out of the apartment, and I slammed the door in his face. That's when I said to her, I gave him a second chance by letting him come back into your life, and he's doing the same stuff. I am serious now. Get rid of him for good or I'm gone. She fell very silent and had her head down and said she didn't want to lose me or him. I got very angry with her and demanded that she make a choice because I couldn't do this with her or her childhood friend. She refused to pick, so I simply left without another word. Discord. About a week later, we both tried to do a session of couples counseling to try and get a second opinion on our situation. And after that, we broke up, and she just broke down. I haven't talked to her since. Now this guy is still doing his best to try and ruin my life, while I'm just trying to live my best life. He is now dating a close friend of mine, and she told me that while Sarah didn't cheat on me with her childhood friend, he did try to convince Sarah to at least cheat on me with someone. And while this did make me very irritated, it's all in the past now. But it begs the question, am I the jerk for making my former girlfriend choose between me and her childhood friend? I don't think you're the jerk at all, and to be honest, I'm really surprised you let that guy come back into your girlfriend's life. If I was in your shoes, I probably would have dumped her right then and there if she let him back in her life. It's also super suspicious that he would come over 5 minutes after you leave. That's really sketchy behavior, and it's not something I would ever take lightly. So good for you for putting your foot down and saying enough is enough, because you do not need to be in a relationship like that, especially if your girlfriend is going to actively try and be around somebody who's trying to ruin your relationship. My friend made very inappropriate comments and jokes towards me, and I've been so upset that I'm now avoiding him, and I honestly don't know how to handle this situation or what to do. So this is a situation that has been greatly upsetting me. I have been friends with this guy for about 2 years, but after a certain point, he has started making some inappropriate and very suggestive comments towards me. He would say stuff about how attractive he found me, how beautiful my legs were, how lucky my boyfriend at the time was, and he would frequently try to hug me and not let go. This has started with small things, and then gradually has gotten worse. At first, I brushed it off, but then I started telling him to stop, and I started avoiding him as much as I could. Unfortunately, though, we go to the same university. One day, though, he made an incredibly inappropriate joke, and I just about lost it. I got extremely mad and asked him to explain the joke, and at that point, he got defensive, and I told him to get lost. The following day, he texted me asking if we could meet up. I declined and told him I didn't want to see him. He then got mad and told me I was overreacting and that it was just a joke and that I should not take those so seriously. I explained my reasons, as well as all of the times he made me uncomfortable, and he tried to downplay all of them. Then he started blabbering about how much my friendship meant to him. He also told me that the reason behind his persistence in hugging me was that he needs them for emotional support. I answered that if he cared so much, he shouldn't have acted like a complete creep. 1 month later, he finally apologized to me via text message, and I told him that I appreciated that. And I thought it was done from there, but it just kept going. Another month later, he texted me again, asking to meet up. I ignored him because at the time I was busy, and I did not want to think about him right now. Today, he texted me again, asking whether I would talk to him ever again. I told him that I've been busy, and he told me he was tired of running after me. He literally texted me once after the apology. He then told me that he misses me and that he feels like he's the only one who cares about our friendship. At this point, I'm just fed up and I don't know what to do. This guy was never your friend. I think we both know that at this point. For reference, this guy's 25 years old, and the joke that he mentioned was incredibly offensive, and I honestly could not include it in here. But I don't blame you for cutting this guy off. And if anything, I think it's time to rip that band-aid off completely. You need to tell him straight up, I don't want to be friends with you, and I don't like you. Stay away from me. After you do that, block him on everything and then move on with your life. This guy obviously had some kind of weird crush on you, and he thought he could make these inappropriate comments, as well as hug you against your consent. I mean, someone trying to hug you without letting go, as well as saying, oh, you're so attractive, I love your legs. Your boyfriend is so lucky. Stuff like that is a massive red flag that this guy has ulterior motives, and you do not need that in your life. And now, through these text messages, he's literally just trying to guilt trip you back into his life. He's still trying to even imply that you're both still friends. Oh, I'm the only one that cares about this friendship. So in my opinion, it's time to get away from this guy officially by blocking him everywhere. And if he really was your friend, he wouldn't be making these types of inappropriate jokes. It's one thing to have a mutual joke amongst friends, but it's another thing to make it personal, disgusting, and weird, which is exactly what this guy was doing. Those types of jokes are just inappropriate, especially for a female friend who has a boyfriend who's also not interested in you. Very strange situation, and hopefully you're able to get away from this creeper, because you do not deserve this type of treatment. My boyfriend of 5 years was chatting and flirting with a random woman online through Discord, and I honestly don't know what to do. Like I said in the title, my boyfriend and I have been together for 5 years. We took a 1-year break in between and decided to be together after realizing we wanted to be together so badly. Today, I was out to dinner with him, and somehow a conversation was brought up about him speaking on Discord to some random woman he met on a mutual mutual game 3 years ago. This was before our break, and it was when we were still together at that point. It sounded a little bit suspicious to me with what he was saying, so I asked to see his phone and what they were talking about. I have never done this before. I always respect his privacy, as I hope he would respect mine, but my intuition was just telling me something is off. As I'm scrolling through their Discord conversation, I blatantly found that he was being overly friendly and very flirtatious with her. He told me the girl was depressed and was looking for a boyfriend, and she knew about us, so it didn't mean anything. He just kept saying that he didn't do anything. In the conversation, he was calling her nicknames I thought he only said to me as a form of endearment, like calling me a noob or something like that. He was giving her so many compliments on her voice and how good it is. He was telling her how she is so beautiful and smart. His first question to her just reminded me of how he approached me when we first started dating, and he had told me that I was an enigma to him. It's like he was trying to figure this woman out and get to know her better. He even sent back a selfie she had posted on her Discord, following along with fire emojis saying how good she looked. He kept asking her to get on voice chat, which he told me was for gaming purposes. He kept trying to keep the conversation going with her until she finally kind of stopped reciprocating the energy. His overall messages were all just really flirty. I felt devastated reading this. He keeps telling me that it was not cheating, even though he crossed the line at some points, especially in what he said, but it feels like emotional cheating to me. I'm so distraught learning about how he was talking to her, and it has honestly fractured my trust in him. He keeps making me feel like I'm overreacting to this situation, but it's painful to me. I just went in on him about how he chose a girl who was obviously depressed and vulnerable, who was looking for a partner, and then tried to swoop in to play the savior with nefarious intentions. To make it worse, this girl has a punk vibe to her, and 2 days ago, he actually told me that he wishes I was more punk looking. I'm just so sad, and I really need some emotional validation possibly. I need objective insight. Am I overreacting with this situation? What should I do? I don't think you're totally overreacting here. The way he's acting and what you're describing is really suspicious. I don't think it's super outlandish to say that the way he was talking to her is very flirtatious. He was definitely talking to her in a way that would be only really appropriate with your significant other. And for him to be suggestive and flirty, as well as complimenting how beautiful this lady looked, and kind of obsessing over her, is more than enough grounds for you to be upset over this. And this happened while you guys were dating. Like, that's not okay in my opinion. So I honestly don't blame you for reacting in the way that you did. I think this classifies as emotional cheating, and that's a really big red flag. So I think maybe it's time to take a good hard look at your relationship and really try to identify what can be done to either improve it or even find some kind of common ground, because otherwise this is only going to cause problems. My ex-girlfriend still has house keys to my apartment 2 months after we broke up, and I'm not sure how to get those keys back or what to do. My ex-girlfriend broke up with me about 2 months ago now. We were together for 3.5 years, and we're talking about marriage and kids. She moved out of our shared flat, rented in solely my name, first to stay with her friends, and then she rented a room 2 weeks later. She kept her things in our flat, moving most of them out once she got a room. I let her keep the keys so that she could get her things when she needed, and she agreed to always let me know when she was coming around. Since then, she's turned hostile and won't communicate with me about what's on my mind, essentially the logistics of the situation. She came a few times without warning, despite me offering to make sure that I'm not even here if she just lets me know when she's coming. Almost 6 weeks after she found a new place, there are still things of hers in my flat, and she still has my keys. I was even on holiday for a couple of weeks, and I really expected that the rest of her stuff would be gone by the time I got back. Normally, I know it would be a case of telling her that I need my keys back and that her stuff needs to be gone by a certain date, or else I would throw it away and just change the locks. However, we have a cat together who is still staying with me, but to be honest, the cat is more hers than it is mine. We moved from her country to mine this year, and she spent a lot of money and time to bring him with us, while I wasn't too bothered if he stayed with her parents. He was supposed to leave to live with her sister 4 weeks ago, as my ex's new roommate doesn't allow pets, but she never came, and I had to message her a couple of times to find out what was going on. Since then, I've received no updates about when our cat is leaving, apart from when I've reached out to my ex to ask. She is currently looking for her own flat, so she can move and take the cat with her, and I've tried to be kind, despite being very upset about the breakup, and offered that she can come and see the cat whenever she wants, and that I will leave the flat to avoid any awkwardness. But weirdly enough, she hasn't been by to see him longer than 15 minutes at a time, and she only did this when I was on holiday. I want my keys back and I want her stuff gone, as it is making it hard for me to move on, but I already can see that she'll just argue that she needs the keys to see the cat. I'd let her see him whenever she wants, but she literally has not bothered to see him so far, so it would be a pointless argument in my mind. But at this point, I'm at a loss and I'm honestly not sure what to do. I think it looks like your ex-girlfriend is using you as a place to keep her stuff, as well as a babysitter for her cat. Like literally, this is not even your cat, it's hers. I would not even waste my time asking for the keys back. I would straight up change my locks and then tell my ex-girlfriend, hey, you have 1 month to get your stuff out of my apartment as well as your cat out of my apartment, neither of which are mine, and then leave it at that. This is literally your apartment. She does not live there, and by not changing your locks, she now has constant access to your house. So I honestly don't think you're the jerk for wanting to have some kind of space from her, as well as demanding that she get her stuff and leave. This way you can have some kind of control back in your life, and this will basically force her to make an appointment to not only get her stuff, but also her cat. I'm very sympathetic to her situation, and I'm sorry that her roommate does not allow cats, but that is for her to figure out. That is not your problem. This will, though, give her the motivation to reach out to that family member that's supposed to take care of her cat. It's not your problem, it's not your responsibility, and I really don't think you should feel bad about doing that. My girlfriend still can't let go of the anger she has towards her ex-boyfriend, and at this point, I don't know what to do. My girlfriend had been in a 6-year relationship, all the way up until her ex cheated on her with a coworker around October of last year. Her life was in shambles. She had to move across the country, but according to her, she was lucky to have a very strong network of friends that helped her move on relatively fast. Apparently, the ex-boyfriend was also very toxic in general as well. As for us, we met in late March, so we've been together for about 6 months now. I understand she barely had any time to heal before starting to date again, but trust me that I know her feelings of love towards me are 100% real, and according to her own words, our relationship isn't a rebound whatsoever. However, throughout the relationship, she's been comparing me to her ex-boyfriend in a very positive way. She would say stuff like, oh, he didn't do this for me, and he would yell at me about such ridiculous things, and she would tell me that she felt safe around me, and I understand where she's coming from, and I appreciate the sentiment. She's probably trying to process what a healthy relationship is like when she's been stuck in a toxic one for most of her adult life. But honestly, it does get frustrating to hear her talk about him all the time. She says that the only feelings left for him in her system are pure anger and rage. She would never ever get back together with him. I believe her, but she's also confessed that every now and then she thinks of him. She gets angry, checks his social media, just so she can check and see how much of a loser he still is, and then feels guilty for doing so. Given that she's now in a relationship with me, I wanted to understand her and make her feel more comfortable sharing her feelings and emotions with me, just so we could get through this together. But it's always demoralizing when I get a message from her saying that she's spiraling and thinking of him again. I think feeling anger against her ex-boyfriend is the worst thing you can feel. Indifference is the way to go, but the journey to get there is very hard. I want to help her, and I know breakups are extremely hard on anybody, but I'm afraid that she'll keep doing this for quite a while. I don't want to break up with her, and I know she doesn't want to break up with me either. I fully believe that she truly loves me. What would be the best way to handle this issue? There's a limit as to how accommodating I can be before it starts affecting me negatively as well. And to be honest, it already has. And I don't want to aggravate the situation by getting angry at her for thoughts that she can't control. What should I do? This is definitely a rough situation because going through a breakup like that must be so devastating, especially after being with someone for so long and then having them cheat on you all of a sudden. That had to have been really hard, so I definitely feel for your girlfriend. But on the other side of that, it seems like you're becoming the only way that she has of processing this situation, and I don't think that's totally fair for you. I think she needs to be the loving girlfriend just as much as you're being the loving boyfriend in her life. And I think having a conversation about that is not completely unreasonable. Like, it is well within the realm of possibility that she might be more understanding of how you feel in this situation than you think. I think the other aspect of this that might be a little hard to accept is the fact that she probably needs to go to therapy. Being treated this way for such a long time is not something that anybody could probably get over super quickly. I know if I went through something like this, I'd be a mess too. And while I'm not sure how you could go about approaching that, I think just being there for her and letting her know, hey, I'm here for you, but I can't be the only one here for you, can hopefully help her see that she needs to find ways to get this together. So hopefully this works out for you, because otherwise it sounds like you're almost at your breaking point and you two have a good thing going, and it would really suck if this would be the reason why your relationship would fall apart. An entitled man tried to steal my upgraded seat on an airplane, refusing to get up and go to his his actual seat in the back of the plane because he wanted to sit next to his wife. Things got so bad that I had to get a flight attendant involved just to get this man to move, as he was not taking no for an answer. Here's what happened. So being someone that used to fly a lot, I constantly was upgraded to business class, first class, or simply just upgraded my seats using my miles. This flight in particular that I'm talking about was a connection for me, so I arrived and boarded later than most of the plane. As soon as I walked onto the plane, I saw that someone was sitting in my upgraded seat, which was no big deal really. If you fly enough, someone sitting in your seat is not an uncommon occurrence. So I look at the gentleman and I say, "Excuse me, I believe you are in my seat." This entitled man does not even bother looking up at me. In fact, he just waves his hand dismissively in my general direction and says,
"Let's just switch seats so I can sit beside my wife."
I understood where he was coming from, and so I asked him what seat he currently has. Now, I don't remember exactly what seat number he said, but it was the last row of the airplane, and it was an aisle seat right by the bathroom. Yes, I have had to fly in those seats in the past, and it's not fun. It made my assigned seat in the first class section look really desirable. Now, for the record, I have switched seats many times with people in my life without a second thought, even first class seats. But the way this guy was behaving and what he was expecting really pushed me to want to sit in my assigned seat. I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna need you to move so I can sit down." It was at this point that he finally looked at me and he said,
"Well, I want to sit by my wife, so I am not moving."
I responded by saying, "Well, if you want to sit by your wife, I am sure whomever is sitting way back there would be more than happy to switch seats way up here so you can sit back there with your wife." He didn't like that at all and instead just stared at me. And at this point, I was getting pretty annoyed. So I looked at him dead in the eye and I just said, "Move." But he refused and looked at me and said that he's not moving. So at that moment, I pushed the call button and a flight attendant came up asking how she could help. I handed her my ticket and I say that he is sitting in my seat. She compares both tickets and sees his number, and in my mind at least, she gave him a look similar to what I gave him when he said he wasn't gonna move. The flight attendant said, "Sir, you need to sit in your assigned seat." And this entitled man just said,
"I want to sit with my wife."
And when he said that, I knew exactly what to say. I wasn't missing a beat, and I parroted my original statement about me being sure whomever was sitting back there would be more than happy to switch seats and sit up here. But boy, oh boy, that obviously made him angry. The flight attendant then looks at his wife and says, "Ma'am, would you like to switch seats so you can sit by your husband?" And in a shocking display, this lady looks at the flight attendant and says,
"No."
And this squashed any confidence that this entitled man had towards taking my seat. So the flight attendant leaned into that typical flight attendant voice and basically said, "Well, sir, you have to sit in your assigned seat, so please gather your things." And what a sad and pathetic sight it was, seeing this grown man act like a baby. He gathered his things and then sulked back towards the back of the plane. And yes, I know what you're thinking. His wife really did sit beside me the entire flight, and she didn't join her husband in the back of the plane. And no, of course we didn't talk to each other, which honestly was perfectly fine by me. How entitled do you have to be to try and steal someone's seat in first class? Those seats are expensive enough, and the fact that he thought he was going to try and get away with that is astonishing. And I bet they probably did this on purpose, just to try and score a first class seat for nothing. They probably had the wife get the first class seat, and then have the husband run up there with her, just to try and guilt trip the poor sucker who walks up on the seat. But thankfully, this guy got put in his place. And hopefully this original poster never has to deal with some entitled man-child the next time he upgrades a seat to first class. I'm worried that a work opportunity involving an old fling will drive my fiancé to leave, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'm a 31-year-old female, and I work in local food development, which is a pretty tight, circular community. I used to spend a lot of time with a farmer's market vendor, who I eventually started helping in the kitchen. When we met in late 2020, I was in an abusive relationship, but was definitely always faithful. We became friendly over time, from just seeing each other at the market. Eventually, I got out of my abusive relationship close to the start of the pandemic. I continued to help out in the kitchen, and eventually, I hooked up with my friend. It was not my best decision, but I was in a very vulnerable place. Ultimately, we are not compatible, and it did eventually end. I dated other people, we stayed friends and kitchen buddies. About 7 to 8 months go by, and life happens. I get dumped, I feel dumb, and I decided to play the field. And during this time, I met my now fiancé. But being in a terrible state, I hooked up with my friend again. But at the time, we were not officially exclusive when it came to dating. I had never done this before. I tried dating multiple people, as well as having multiple partners at the time. I won't excuse my bad judgment at the time, it just kinda happened. My fiancé is uncomfortable skeptical about my past with this market friend, but since we had a pretty tight friendship and good working relationship, I agreed to just keep it professional. I stopped being so friendly with my very close friend, but still see him around because we are still in this local food community. Now, like a year later, some work and granted funded opportunities have come up, and I need expert advice to try and piece things together. I started asking my friend for help, and I anticipate the work partnership will grow if the funding and resources line up. I did ask others for help first, but this has turned out as the most efficient way to get expert answers. I just told my fiancé about this, and I'm actually afraid he might move out. We've been on the rocks lately, but I want to be transparent about having contact with my old friend. It is honestly strictly professional. I'm trying to avoid unnecessary meetings or phone calls, especially if they don't have to do with next steps. We do have some trust issues. I'm honestly a bad communicator, and I'm trying to work on it. I have never cheated, but I have definitely made some mistakes. So I just want to hear some outside opinions here. This is truly a work move, but unfortunate emotions are involved. What should I do? I think you really need to think about your fiancé in this situation. I totally understand that working with this guy is going to improve your professional standings, but it honestly begs the question, is it worth it? Is it worth possibly messing up your relationship? Also, you can try and get ahead at work. I mean, you said it yourself. Your relationship is on the rocks lately, and you're on the verge of getting married. Do you really think it's worth getting around this old fling just to try and get your professional career going, especially if your fiancé is not comfortable with it? Because right now, it seems like you're choosing convenience over his comfort. I mean, this guy can't possibly be the only person you could talk to try and get an expert opinion on something, right? I mean, there's other people in your field you could reach out to try and have some kind of partnership with figuring stuff out. Yeah, it might be with someone that you don't know, but at the end of the day, your fiancé is probably going to feel a lot better about the situation if you just go with somebody else. It's probably a really big sore spot in your relationship already. So why would you try to lean into that just to try and get ahead at work? So hopefully things can work out for you, because from what you're saying, in my opinion, the actions you're taking are causing a lot of friction in your relationship, and these things really do need to be addressed and fixed sooner than later. My boyfriend is texting his female coworker and then deleting the text messages later, and it's really suspicious, and I don't know what to do. My boyfriend and I have been together for about 2.5 years. We have a baby, we have 2 dogs, and we own a house together. My boyfriend works in a male-dominant field, but the administrators at his job are female. He usually talks about them to me, and I never have had any concerns. He is closer with one of them. We'll call her Sarah, that's not her real name, all because she has worked there longer. The ladies at his work have been constantly asking when he is going to bring in our baby, who's about 8 months old. They want him to bring our baby into work because he always shows them pictures. Today, he asked me to bring her in when I had some time, which I ended up doing. Nothing about this felt off at all, and they all were very nice. Later, when he got home, he left his phone unlocked on the dryer. When I went to fold laundry, he had messages pulled up from an unsaved number. The first message in the conversation read, "Thanks for telling your wife to bring your baby up here. 8 months late, but it's whatever." There was a little bit of back and forth banter, and she vented to him about her day, and that was about it. But what really bothered me is that I looked at his phone and her notifications were muted. When I asked him who that unsaved number was, he said that it was Sarah, and when I asked why she was muted, he said, I just don't like talking to her." I handed his phone back to him, and right then and there, he deleted the messages right in front of me. Also, as a side note, he has a work phone, and she does have the number for that one. He does not delete messages from her on his work phone, and that is where they talk about work matters, things that need to be ordered, stuff that they're looking for, etc. I also started thinking about it, and to be honest, he talks about Sarah quite a bit. He talks about her just as much as he talks about his other coworkers, and he has never mentioned anything about not liking to talk to her. He actually gave her son money for fireworks and bought her son a birthday present. He has even gone on a work trip with her and has never had anything bad to say. It just all seems really suspicious, and I don't know if I'm in the wrong for thinking that way. What should I do? I gotta be honest, him deleting text messages from her right in front of you after you basically caught him in the act of having some kind of secret conversation, as well as a muted secret conversation, is really, really suspicious. My first thought reading through that was, well, why does he have to delete that? What is he trying to hide? And I don't want to say this is like the beginning stages of cheating, but it can be seen as super suspicious when your significant other is deleting text messages from another woman that he works with. That's a little sketchy in my opinion. I think if anything, it's time to be a little bit more vigilant on what he is and isn't doing with Sarah, as well as trying to pick up on any subtle changes to his behavior when he comes home from work, as well as his general attitude around the house. I'm not saying he's cheating. I mean, we have very little evidence to even begin to suggest that, but it does seem super suspicious, so I don't blame you for having some worries. I am struggling with a lot of depression, and my partner is completely ignoring my cries for help, and I don't know what to do. I have been with my partner for 10 years, and I have struggled with severe anxiety and depression for quite a long time. Since dating him and leaving high school, my friendship circle diminished, mainly due to me realizing who were and were not my friends during the transition from high school to university. So as a result, I did cut some people off, but in all actuality, no one really reached out to me for me to cut them off. Additionally, my partner didn't have enough confidence to attend university parties or outings that he was invited to, and he never initiated outings with his best friends, especially anything that I could come along with. I tried to go to social events and meet random people to befriend, but he didn't want me to come along to those either, so we didn't have a social circle at all, and continue to not have any, despite my attempts to find us friends. Besides this, I have given up on all my goals and dreams, mainly career-driven dreams, and to make matters worse, I'm getting bullied at my workplace, especially since I have no friends to turn to or any in general. I also am a carer for one of my parents, and I support both of them financially, as they're both in significant debt. They can be abusive towards me and each other quite badly. I live with them to ensure their safety and well-being. These points are the main sources of my sadness. For context, I sometimes get really depressed and succumb to posting things on my social media about how lonely I am friendship-wise. Nothing really weird or that would spark outrage or offend or attack anybody. Sometimes I post out if anyone is free to talk, as I had a lot of friends in high school, and sometimes I hope someone would respond. I've tried everything to get better. I've tried medications, I've tried psychological help, but sometimes on rare occasions, I put out a desperate cry for help, as I just have no one to talk to besides my partner. But it can be hard to see or to speak to him at times. My partner sees these posts and completely ignores them. Even when I see him, he doesn't bring it up and asks if everything is okay. I know he might be tired of me and my depression, as we've had discussions about it, and he really does seem to care, but sometimes I wish he responded. I spoke about my recent issues with depression the other night to him, and I was in tears, and he said he would do more and be more attentive. However, I posted out something a few hours ago and could see that he saw it, and yet he didn't respond or give me a call or message me. Am I being petty, or is this a lack of concern? What should I do? If you're going to post weird cryptic messages on Facebook or any other social media, then I really would not expect people to actually answer, because from the sounds of it, it looks like you're just looking for attention, and seeking out attention from people online is not going to be the answer here, in my opinion. It also seems like you're putting all this responsibility on your boyfriend to reply to these weird and vague messages you're putting out on social media, and I honestly don't blame him for not responding. Encouraging that kind of action just doesn't seem right, in my opinion. I think going back and seeing a doctor, as well as a therapist that can help you get your life together, would be incredibly beneficial towards you. You can set forward-thinking goals that will actually help you accomplish something, instead of posting vague messages on Facebook as some way to cope with how you're feeling. Those messages don't actually do anything for you, and if anything, it's keeping you in this weird spot. I also would say it might be time to move out. I understand that you're trying to take care of your parents, but from the sounds of it, they're not being very kind to you. And considering your circumstances both at work and in your personal life, it might be important for you to take steps to move out so that you can have some distance from them. But I really do hope you get the help that you need and you're able to see a doctor to help you with your depression, because you really do deserve to be happy. My dad has finally stepped back into my life, and I'm honestly not sure how to react to this, especially considering his sketchy past. Here's what happened. So basically, my father is an alcoholic. He's done bad things when he's drunk. He sold our house to buy drinks. He kicked us out at one point onto the street, and he has let me down again and again. Finally, after several years, we moved away from him, since my mom finally decided she can't and won't fix him. She tried to apply for alimony, but it took about 4 years till it actually got sorted out. On the second year of this process, my mental health took a plunge, and I got sent to a psych ward for a month. That's when he decided he wants to be in our lives again. So he stopped drinking and started taking us out to the cinema, as well as doing all these other activities all of the sudden. I was okay with this at the time. However, recently he broke up with his girlfriend and has now lived with us for 2 months. He pays rent, which is good because we're really struggling financially, which is why I'm trying to be nice to him, but it's so hard. He just doesn't realize that he hurt me. He told me that him being an alcoholic didn't hurt me in any way because he never beat me or anything. I didn't say anything because I knew he would argue with me more. Lately, he just acts like I love him so much, like I need him in my life so much. He told me countless times that I'm dependent on him, but I live so many years without him. I'm not only not dependent on him, I also don't even want him. I don't know what to do. I feel just genuinely uncomfortable around him, and I tell him this, but he ignores it and tells me I'm lying. And he's trying to help me feel better mentally, but he honestly only makes it worse. Like I might be doing good, and then he comes into my room without knocking, bursts the door open, and sits on my bed. Then he asks me some questions, and when I try to answer, he interrupts me and starts telling me his experience, not listening to what I'm saying at all. I just genuinely feel so bad around him. I have a great day, and I feel good, and then we talk, and I'm just upset and mad again. He even threatens to never talk to me again, or even to cut me out of his will if he thinks I'm being rude. But I don't care about all the garbage he's done. What I do care about is how he acts now. So I really need some advice on how to be nice to him when he acts like such a jerk. What should I do? This is a really tricky situation because it sounds like this dad is an absolute narcissist. He is not a good person, and I don't think he ever will be either. I really don't care that this guy straightened out his act and decided to stop drinking. He's obviously a controlling jerk, and you do not need that in your life. The fact that he just goes into your room without any kind of self-respect or any kind of boundaries is just so rude, and it's unbecoming of someone trying to call you their father. So the first thing I would do is probably get a lock for that door. Set some very clear boundaries with him. Say, hey, I really need my own personal space, and I don't want you in my room. I would also talk to your mom about his behavior, because the way he's acting is completely inappropriate. He is sitting there trying to convince you that you're dependent on him, when in reality, you're doing just fine without him. The original poster goes on to say that they can't move out for personal reasons. And if that is the case, then I would probably see how you can make steps to distance yourself from that man as much as possible. I would not let him get inside your head and mess with you in any way. You said it yourself, you're doing better. You start to feel good, and then he comes in and makes everything worse. And from my perspective, you don't owe him anything. This man was a terrible father to you from the sounds of it, and his alcoholism ruined your childhood. So I think you just need to remember that. Anytime he tries to say that you need him and that he is there for you and all this other garbage, just remember the man he actually is. My girlfriend was gifted an apartment and is asking me to pay her rent just so I can move in, and I'm not sure what to do. I've been dating my girlfriend for a year now. When we first started dating, her parents bought her a small one-bedroom apartment, and she's been living in it ever since. She pays the bills that come her way, but there's no rent and there's no mortgage for her. The entire time we've been dating, both her and her parents made it very clear that if I ever move in, I would have to pay zero rent. Obviously, I'd have to pay for myself when it comes to bills or repairs or anything like that, but I just would not owe them any rent money. Now that my lease is up, I'm starting to move into her place, and moving in has been quite stressful on both of us, and we got into a fight this morning. A few minutes into our fight, she explains that I need to pay $700 a month in rent just to move into her place. This $700 includes also paying for all other fees, which would take it to about $1,500 a month. Honestly, this place is very small for the two of us. If I split $1,500 a month for a $3,000 apartment where I live, we could upgrade to a much bigger and better place. So this really isn't a good deal for me at all. Additionally, I feel it's quite slimy for her to ask me to pay rent when she pays none. Her parents bought her the place, so I view it as theirs and not hers. If her parents asked me to pay rent, I'd have zero problems with it, but she's taking their gift and trying to make a profit off of me, her boyfriend. We had quite a huge fight about this, and I don't know how to feel. She claims she's giving me a good deal on rent, but overall, it's really not a good deal for me. So given the circumstances, I feel extremely uncomfortable that she's gone against her word. They agreed that I would never have to pay rent, and now all of a sudden I owe her this money? I feel like she's not treating me like an equal partner. I would never try to make a buck off of my girlfriend moving into my place. I would only expect her to pay half of what I pay because we're equals. It's all super confusing and very frustrating, and I honestly don't know what to do. This is really shady behavior. She's trying to enforce some kind of rent on you, most likely due to that argument you had the other day. I mean, $700 a month out of nowhere when you're expecting to pay nothing after having a verbal agreement with her mom and dad as well as her that you would never have to pay rent is really shady behavior. And the original poster has it right. Why would his girlfriend treat him this way? It really does seem like she is just trying to make money off of him, and that is so unfair for him. He clearly sees them as equals, and he would never do anything like that, but she sees it differently suddenly. If I was in your shoes, there's no way way on earth I would move in there. And if I did move in there, there's no way I would pay for anything. Unless it's in writing, I'm not paying a cent. But if they do want to try and have something in writing, then that would be different. It's especially crazy to me that your girlfriend would tell you as you're moving into this apartment that you now suddenly have to start paying rent. That is honestly a massive red flag in my opinion. So take your stuff and move right back out and find some place that's going to be honest with you, because the way your girlfriend is acting is super sketchy, and I just would not want to live in that kind of environment. An entitled Karen tries to haggle down a price estimate that we give her from my business, but my manager simply was not having it, as he put her in her place almost instantaneously, refusing to entertain her attempts to try and get a cheaper price. Here's what happened. So for a bit of context, the software development company I intern at uses a special sheet to estimate the cost of building a certain software for a client. The sheet includes employees working on the project, how long they estimate it will take, and pretty much all the logistics associated with it. After an intern goes around the department collecting this info from the various employees, we then calculate the cost and send it to the client to accept or reject. And since our company is so popular in the area that I work at, we have a pretty long wait sometimes. So if you reject the estimate, chances are you might have to wait for a long time all over again just to request a new one. So the day was slow when this happened, and they mostly had me man the phone and go on coffee runs. Typical intern stuff overall. Then a client calls in stating that she wants a specific software for her employees so she can more accurately track their work hours. By this point into my internship, I had done at least 4 or 5 of these sheets at least, and I was taught by my supervisor how to identify which departments would be needed for which projects. So after gathering the details from the client, I hang up and translate the needs for the employees and essentially explain it in programmer jargon. A half an hour later, I'm done with the sheet and I have checked the calculations 3 times. So I email the client, and I swear not even 2 minutes later, I get an estimate rejected message pop up on the company smartphone that I was given. She added a reply stating, "This estimate is non-compatible with me." So I responded by saying, "We are really sorry to hear that, ma'am. Please enjoy the rest of your day." And then I go about my business. Roughly an hour later, she emails the phone again, asking me if that's all I have to say. By this point, I realized what she was trying to do, and I report to my supervisor that this entitled Karen was trying to haggle the price. My supervisor calls Karen's phone and asked her if she would like to have the estimate resent to her so she can accept, and the Karen outright tells her she wants a cheaper price, to which my supervisor tells her the price is non-negotiable and she can either take it or leave it. So the entitled Karen uses her signature move, requesting to speak to my manager's manager, but my supervisor literally simply informed her that she'd get the same response and then just hung up on her. This entitled Karen did eventually call back and even had the audacity to show up to the building just to try and renegotiate the price. But fortunately for us, she was shot down every single time, and eventually this entitled Karen gave up. It's always really satisfying to watch when the customers realize that they aren't worth the business they bring when you account for the pain that comes from them. I mean, seriously, the entitled Karen was obviously looking for some kind of argument, and the fact that she thought she was going to try and haggle this down to some ridiculous number just to try and steal a deal from this business is actually incredibly entitled. I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into making this type of software, regardless of what the context is. It's not some easy copy and paste job. Like, there's a lot of coding and there's a lot of things that go into it. So it's really refreshing to see that this business doesn't bow down to these idiots. Because you know what? Sometimes you have managers or supervisors who have absolutely no spine, and they bend to whatever the customer has to say, and basically makes any kind of pricing or any kind of policy very flexible and almost non-existent. Like, what's the point of having a price if anybody can call up, have a bad attitude, get offended because they don't like the price, and then haggle it down to something lower? But thankfully, the original poster's manager did not allow that to happen, because this entitled Karen clearly just wanted to get her way, regardless of the time or effort it would take just to fill her request. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled boss expects me to work unpaid overtime, completely ignoring the fact that I'm part-time and that I won't be paid if I work any further. So I get malicious and I choose to walk out when my time's up. And needless to say, my manager was not happy. Here's what happened. So I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got to this position because it was just an easy escape from teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be a principal, which is pretty common where I come from. And she also did this just to flaunt the little authority that she got from it. One issue that I had with with her was about punctuality. She was especially hard-nosed about it, which would have been fine if she weren't herself systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to request students to be on time at classes when the principal was half an hour late at a meeting she scheduled herself with their parents. The end of the year comes around, and it's time for the final exams of the high school students. The students start to receive their convocations for the exam week. When we see the convocations, we're already upset because the time is wrong on purpose. It would tell a student that they need to be there at 7:30 for a 4-hour test without even telling them that the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 o'clock and ends at 12 o'clock. A few days later, the teachers receive their own convocations to monitor the test themselves. It's usual to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned on each of our convocations that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 o'clock exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to screw the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and let the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time. But 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most. And as teachers, we are used to being there simply before class starts anyways. Most of us simply ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual. But a dozen of us decided to comply, and we sent her emails tallying up the total number of hours we'd be working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered some BS that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass, we complied, and my colleagues declared their overtime. In the end, that came to about 30 minutes of overtime total for doing absolutely nothing, and we still had to get paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues, and that's because I work part-time, and as such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. The reason for that is because both part-time and overtime are paid more than regular hours, so it has to be either or. Friday comes around, and I've sent a new email reminding her about the upcoming issues, and I still don't get an answer. The last 4-hour test starts at 1 o'clock, and at 2:45, I ask my colleague monitoring the room next door, who is also in on the plan, mind you, to cover me for the next 5 minutes. There's a door between the two exam rooms, and we can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there is a room full of students with 2.5 hours left, and I don't know if she's scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all my hours for this week, and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my teaching exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch. It's 3 seconds until I'm just about having to leave. I look at her face while she gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion to realization, all the way up to anger. And just as she's about to answer, it's time. So I turn around and I walk away. She looks at me and says, "What are you doing? Stay here, we're not finished." But I answer without looking by saying, "Sorry, my time's up. My work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you." And I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public, in full view and hearing of students, would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd be getting in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring in earlier. I thank my colleague, and I point at the professor who's just catching up. She is red as a beet, and I tell him, "I brought you the principal." I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her for me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which really must have set her off because she leaves early on Fridays, and she did not want to be there. Next week, obviously, she requested that we had a talk in her office, and when I did that, I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong, and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and the teaching staff. Needless to say, she was definitely in the wrong because this principal simply knew that she would lose. That is a really cool story, and I wish where I live teachers had this kind of flexibility as well as this ability to flex their rights. For context, the original poster is from overseas. I'm not entirely sure what country they're from, but based on the fact that they have a union and they were able to cut out of there without some kind of negative repercussion, kind of gave it away in my opinion. But it really would be nice if we had something like that in the States. And maybe there are teacher unions that can step in and help defend you when you're under some kind of scrutiny for leaving when your time's up? If there is, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. But it is always absolutely satisfying to see some kind of upper manager or a principal in this matter get put in their place by their own ignorance. And if she simply read her emails and reviewed who was watching what when it came to monitoring for this exam, she probably could have avoided so much trouble with this, as well as avoided any type of future strike from this union. My girlfriend freaks out and starts sobbing anytime she makes me uncomfortable or sad, and it's gotten to the point where I honestly don't know what to do. So my girlfriend and I have been dating for a few years, and this was honestly always kind of been a problem. It used to be worse and happen more frequently, but it always leaves me shaken. It just happened again, and I feel like I really need advice because I don't understand what is going on. Basically, almost any time she does anything to make me sad or hurt my feelings, she has a complete meltdown, and it turns into me comforting her instead. I genuinely do believe that she's really feeling the emotions that she's expressing and not manipulating me. However, I always come away from it feeling like I just diffused something tragic and didn't get to work through why I was feeling hurt in the first place. I've talked to her about this after the fact, and she agrees that she needs to work on it, yet it still happens sometimes and I really hate it. Tonight, I had gotten home from work and was really looking forward to spending time together. We were sitting cuddled on the couch discussing what to do for the evening. She's gonna make dinner while I do laundry, and then we're gonna run errands together. Then she gets a call from a coworker and a friend that her and a bunch of other coworkers are going to a bar and could pick her up as soon as possible. She immediately accepts this and hangs up, and then asks if I want to go too. I'm pretty stunned that she would just throw everything we had planned out the window. But anyways, I'm tired from work and I'm worried about the chores that need to get done, so I just decline. She notices that I'm feeling down and quiet, and I just say I'm sad that she's going to be leaving, which is true, but I tell her to enjoy and just to have fun. But she will not let it go. She keeps saying, if you don't want me to go, then I just won't. And I say, I'm not going to make that decision for you, but you seem like you really want to go. But even when I say that, she still won't drop it. I keep telling her it's her decision, and I don't really get why she keeps asking me. She then starts crying. I ask what's going on, and she snaps at me. She says, I'm only ever here at work, and when I want to go out, you just get sad, which I don't even know how to respond to that because I didn't expect it. So I try to carefully say, yeah, I'm sad, but it's not that big of a deal, and I don't think it warrants you starting crying. But that ended up being the wrong thing to say. She starts full on sobbing and says I always invalidate her feelings, which really hurts to hear. I'm completely stunned while also being numb at this point, so I just go to the bedroom and lay down, and later she comes in to get dressed to leave. I ask her to sit down for a moment, and I try to explain what we've discussed before, which is that it really hurts that she starts spiraling over me being sad, because then I have to push my feelings aside just to comfort her. But after I said that, she basically said that she thinks it's hypocritical for me to say that because it's like I'm telling her she's overreacting. Then she starts saying that she's terrible, which is a common trend during these spirals, and saying other hateful things towards herself. She's wailing and her coworkers are literally at the door, so I do what I always do and I stamp my feelings out just to comfort her. She left a bit ago and I'm just sitting here feeling like there's a hole in my chest. Like I actually cannot comprehend how it got to this point. Honestly, I feel like tonight's thing is not really a great example either because it definitely didn't start out being anyone's fault, I think. However, there have been times in the past where she really did say or do something to hurt me, even if it's unintentional, and then it led down the same path. Can I please get some insight into this? Has anyone else ever dealt with something like this in their life? I can't wrap my head around this because, again, I genuinely feel like she is not being intentionally manipulative. However, the end result is that I hate expressing negative feelings around her, and I swallow down everything I have to say as best I can. What should I do? This really sounds like a sketchy situation, and it sounds like your significant other definitely needs therapy. It is not normal to start crying and freaking out over such small things. So that behavior is super inappropriate, even if it's not intentional and you do believe her. It also sounds like she clearly struggles with tolerating how hurting or disappointing someone else will make her feel. Like it literally goes from 0 to 100 pretty quickly if you're dissatisfied or disinterested in whatever she's doing. Like she always has to have some kind of validation from you, so I can completely understand how toxic this would become. But it also seems like you need to break the cycle. Like maybe when she starts freaking out over small things like this, maybe it's time to take a step back and not immediately give her comfort and stomp out your feelings. Like there's nothing wrong with the way you feel. That's not wrong in my opinion. And objectively speaking, it would be near impossible to have a sustainable relationship if your needs are never never gonna be met simply because your girlfriend freaks out and starts sobbing simply because she thinks that you're upset with her. Like, that's not a rational thing for people who are nearly 30 years old to be acting like. But I think at the end of the day, you can't control how she behaves. You can only change what you do. So hopefully you can find some kind of solution to this, because the way she's acting is absolutely obnoxious, whether it's genuine or not. And in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would want to try and get this sorted out, because I cannot see this relationship sustaining with this kind of environment. I didn't respect my partner's wishes or boundaries when he needed time to think about our relationship. And as a result, I'm not sure if we're still going to be together, and I honestly don't know what to do. So we've been dating for over 2 months, and the relationship progressed quite quickly, in that if the circumstances had allowed it, we would probably be living together by now. He was fine with me sleeping over his house as often as I wanted to, as long as there were times when we each had our own thing to do, whether it was work, hobbies, a social life, stuff like that. It still wasn't an ideal situation, as he lived with his brother, and I did want a little more privacy and space for myself, but whatever. I never felt entirely comfortable there doing whatever I wanted, and of course, over time, the aim was to see whether we could find a way to live together. The answer was yes at the time, but only when it became possible. So we were eager to see each other all the time in the interim, and I suppose that turned into a form of burnout for the both of us. He has ADHD and approaches problems in a very rational way, which he expects from almost everyone. Unfortunately, my emotional side often dominates, and most of what I say is deemed as an excuse or justification for my behavior. My behavior that evening was certainly unacceptable in hindsight. Otherwise, I wouldn't have behaved the way I did in the first place, and I do acknowledge that what I did was wrong. I suffer from anxiety, OCD, and recovering ED and PTSD, so I expected him to be there for me, as he always has been, and when he wasn't, I panicked and decided to go over thinking that he'd be okay with it, not realizing at the time that the way I feel shouldn't always fall on anyone but myself to fix or deal with. I had just put an overwhelmingly amount of pressure on him to fix all of my problems. He had repeatedly told me not to go over and that we'd talk the next day, but I didn't listen. So when I arrived, he told me to go home and he didn't let me in. I thought the relationship had essentially ended at that point, knowing he probably could never see me as normal ever again, or as a rational person that he would be able to get through to. I apologized the next day, and he asked me to give him a few days to think about what he should do. Of course, my anxiety and self-destructive nature kicked in, thinking that it was over and that there was no point. So I messaged him every day, asking to meet up so that I could apologize properly. I wanted to tell him that I care about him, I love him, and I miss him. He finally agreed to see me briefly today, and he basically said that he doesn't know if he can feel the same way that he used to about me, that it's as though I'm a different person, and that all of his friends are saying my behavior is definitely a red flag, and that it'll only get worse over time. I was a complete mess the entire time, and could only really listen. Everything I said did sound like an excuse, though I did say that I felt awful for potentially ruining a relationship that was going well, and that I only needed a few modifications here and there. I suggested we give each other space, such as only meeting in public, and the conversation ended with him saying that when and if he chooses to contact me in a few days, or even in a week, then we would see each other. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed for how I acted, and how little I was able to communicate to him. And also, I'm quite afraid of seeing his friends again, simply because of how they will view me. I don't have much interest in going over to his house anymore, as being turned away, and rightfully so, was traumatic in and of itself. I suppose it's just something I'll have to face for the sake of the relationship if he contacts me again. I intend to keep myself busy and not ruminate over the facts, but also try to explain how not listening was a violation of his trust, as well as his boundaries and rights as an individual. What should I do? In my opinion, it seems like the original poster really needs to pump the brakes. You have been with this guy for 2 months, not to mention the fact that you clearly have some anxiety issues that you very clearly need to get under wraps. Like, you're obviously triggered in a lot of ways, and you completely ignored his boundaries just to try and validate your own weird sense of entitlement. And honestly, in my opinion, that's exactly what it is. Because here's the thing, your triggers are your responsibility. You need to manage them yourself, and in my opinion, it is not his responsibility to manage that for you. So when he says, hey, I need some time, you really should have respected that. But I also think he's probably cluing in and trying to give you the soft approach that he's basically breaking up with you. He said that, hey, if I contact you in a week, or if I even contact you at all, then we can try and talk to each other. But in my opinion, that's code talk for him saying, yeah, I don't want to be with you. I mean, you're also thinking that, yeah, you would have been living together if the circumstances were different. And I seriously think that's way too early to be thinking about this early in a relationship. So hopefully if this relationship doesn't work out, you can be better in the next one, because your behavior truly was not okay in this situation, and hopefully you do better in the future. An entitled Karen lets her kid play in my car while it's unlocked, and after I tell them to get lost and get off my property, I discovered that this kid had pooped all over my car. Here's what happened. For context, I'm a classic car nut. I live in England, and I own an old Cadillac. I don't really get a chance to go to car shows due to working at night. COVID has also made things difficult, and sometimes I just don't have the money for fuel. So when I get a chance, I make a day out of it. In 2013, I went to a local car show on the beachfront in the next town over. The show mainly had American cars and rat rods, around 30 to 40 cars in total, so it was a good-sized meetup. I had only heard about it that morning, and so I went on my own. My nephews would usually come along, but this time it was just me. I found a spot and parked my caddy. It was a lovely sunny day. There was an ice cream stand, as well as a fish and chip shop nearby. What more could you possibly want? After about an hour of chatting to people and answering their questions, since my caddy is a pretty rare car in the United Kingdom, I went to see the other cars for myself. The cars were parked end to end with good space in between, so there was a good line of cars all around. There was a wide variety of cars, from pristine cars to quarter-mile specials, to some that were heavily chopped up, ranging from the 1930s to the 1990s. And as fate would have it, guess which idiot in this entire line forgot to lock up his car? When I came back after viewing all these beautiful cars, I saw a kid in the driver's seat who had to be about 4 or 5 years old, yanking at the steering wheel and pressing all the buttons. All the while, his entitled Karen of a mother was just sitting there taking pictures. Here's the thing. The first rule of a car show is you don't just get into other people's cars. You most definitely ask first. I walk up to them and I say, "What are you doing?" The entitled Karen said, "My son just wanted to sit in the car." I then asked her, who said that he could? And after I said this, the entitled Karen looked at me and said, "Me, I did." I then explained to her that this is my car. I then said, "Why didn't you ask before you let your kid in my car?" The entitled Karen said, "Because it was unlocked and no one would let him sit in their cars." And it was at this point that I realized that this entitled Karen went around this lot checking for unlocked or unattended cars just so her stupid kid could try and sit in it. At this point, I was super upset that this kid was using the inside of my car as his jungle gym. I then said, "Get him out of my car now." After I said that, she didn't say another word. She got her son out and she left. When they started walking away though, I saw why he wasn't allowed into other people's cars. There's no other way to really say this other than to just say it. This kid pooped his pants. The back of his underwear had a very distinctive stain. Not only was it on the seat, it was on the steering wheel, the door, the dashboard, the radio, and on every single switch that this stupid kid was touching. Thankfully, there was a shop nearby, so I went and I got some baby wipes and some disinfectant spray. I tried to go looking for them to make this entitled Karen answer for what her kid did to my car, but unfortunately, I could not find them. The venue was very busy and there were a lot of people. Unfortunately, the smell stayed for weeks and I had to replace the seats altogether. I was planning on doing this anyways, but this pushed the need forward. But hopefully the next time I go to one of these shows, I'll remember to lock the door so this doesn't happen again. I can't imagine that happening to a car like that. That must have been horrendous. Here you are just trying to enjoy a night out with an old Cadillac, showing it off for people walking by, and this entitled Karen just lets her kid go wild in your car. Quite literally at that. Absolutely disrespectful and so inappropriate. Why on earth would anybody think it's okay to let their stupid kid bounce around in somebody else's car? Like, this is not a prop. That belongs to somebody. Overall, this is a really terrible situation to be stuck in, and hopefully this doesn't ruin his enthusiasm for going to car shows and just trying to enjoy himself. After 10 years of being a waiter, I have officially finally quit. I started as a waiter when I was 16, and now I'm 26 years old, and I'm just so done with this. I started to look for other jobs, expecting to take a massive monetary hit. I earn about $10 an hour plus tips. As a side note, I live in Germany, so our wage system is a little bit different than America. So in total, it's about $16 an hour. That's pretty good, especially for a 16-year-old. When people ask me, "You worked there for 10 years, what made you quit?" I have a hard time explaining actually. The pay is alright, but literally every other aspect of it is just grinding me down. I have no vacation days, days. I have no sick days. If I'm sick or if I take a vacation, it's like I'm out of a job for that while. Therefore, in the last 10 years, I missed exactly 5 days of work because of Corona and never taking a vacation. The job also feels like there is so much on the line. I don't even know why. It feels like it's so important that everything works perfectly. A few weeks ago, the person who is doing the dishes discovered that it is not actually his job to dry the cutlery. So now he demands $5 per night from the waiters just to do it. He knows we simply don't have the time to do it ourselves. So now, because of this, I'm having to pay people. Like, what on earth is going on? This guy is always under the influence at work, or he just straight up shows up late. But the kicker is, seemingly nobody in all of Germany is willing to do the job, so my boss can't replace him. With all that in mind, I went grocery shopping, and there I heard through the intercom that they are hiring and paying $15 an hour. And I was absolutely floored. The same day I applied, I got hired. I get vacation days now. I get sick leave. I can shop with a discount. The store is within walking distance. The perks of working here go on and on. On one hand, I'm very sad to leave the industry, as well as my working mates. But every time I actually think about the new job, I just get excited. I will, however, miss the stories that this industry generates. I just feel so happy to finally be moving forward with my life. This is a crazy story for a few reasons. For one, I'm super happy you got out of your waiting position. That can be very stressful, and I know exactly what you mean, where it feels like this is a make or break moment when in reality, you're just bringing food out to customers. Like this isn't some life-changing experience, it's just food service. But more importantly, I can't believe that one of the dishwashers got away with having you pay him $5 a night, as well as all the other waiters pay him $5 a night just to dry the cutlery that you use throughout the night. How on earth did he not get fired for that? I'm pretty sure that might be some form of extortion, and I honestly don't blame you for quitting. So hopefully your new job works out, and I'm happy for you that you can finally take days off and not feel like you're about to lose your job, especially when that job is not very good in the first place. I am trying to distance myself from a friend who has the same mutual friends that I do, and I'm honestly not sure how to go about doing this. I first want to say that I really do understand that this seems like the kind of problem a high schooler would have, but I really could use some advice. I have a friend, we will call her Sarah, that's not her real name, who I've known for about 10 years. However, the past 2 years, I've been distancing myself for a few reasons. For starters, Sarah puts me down a lot. She is extremely negative about everything and shows no interest in my life. She is also very jealous of me, and this isn't something that I'm inferring. She has told me when she's under the influence that she is jealous of me. And to top this all off, she is really horrible to my dog whenever she's at my house. She calls him it and pushed him off the couch when he was a puppy, so he would land on his back. Stuff like that, really terrible things. I have brought this up with her in the past, but she hasn't changed her attitude. Anyway, we have a mutual friend. We'll call her Rosie, that's also not her name. And I still love and want her in my life. A few of mine and Rosie's friends from across the country are meeting up next month, and Rosie has invited Sarah. This is fine. I obviously cannot dictate who other people are friends with, but I'm wondering how to go about things in a mature way. In the past, Sarah and Rosie have stayed at my house, but I really don't want Sarah at my house for the reasons I previously mentioned. I don't want to feel uncomfortable in my own house, but I'm happy to be civil and friendly in a group setting. Sarah and Rosie will be assuming they're both staying at my place. I'm happy for Rosie to come, but I don't really want Sarah in my space anymore. When the topic comes up, I'm wondering how best to tell Sarah that I don't want her to stay at my place. I want to be honest, really, and not make some stupid excuse, but I don't want to cause any kind of weird atmosphere at the meetup and cause my other friends any kind of discomfort. Perhaps there's no way around it, but I'm not really sure. The easiest route would be to just let her come to my place and stay the weekend, but I've been such a pushover and people pleaser for this friendship, I don't want to continue anymore. What should I do? From the outside looking in, considering the fact that you have mutual friends, I don't think you can have Rosie stay with you and not ruffle her or Sarah's feathers about the situation. The easiest way out of it that I can see is to probably say that nobody can stay over, because honestly, singling out either person is only going to make things awkward, and it's going to bring in that atmosphere that you're desperately trying to avoid. And the way that that lady's treating your dog, I absolutely would not want someone like that in my house. I'm personally a big believer that the way you treat animals is the way you really are as a person. So seeing someone push a dog off the couch as a puppy, as well as just generally treating it very poorly, is a pretty big red flag in my opinion, and I can understand why you're trying to distance yourself from her. But I do agree agree with you. I think there will come a time when you need to talk to Sarah and explain to her that you do not want to be friends. I don't think, however, that during this meetup would be an appropriate time to have that conversation. I think waiting until after this meetup would be the best thing for you, because otherwise this is honestly just going to ruin the meetup. But when you do have that conversation, stay strong, because you said it yourself. You've been a people pleaser and a pushover for too long, and she needs to know exactly what's going on. My best friend is cheating on her fiancé, and I don't know what to do. I have been friends with my friend Jane for almost 15 years. Jane is not her real name. We both got engaged around the same time, and our weddings are 2 months apart. We are in each other's bridal parties, and I am her maid of honor. Everything up until now has been smooth sailing. That is, until I found out that Jane has been cheating on her fiancé with a married man. I met her affair partner once and found their relationship inappropriate, especially since he's the same age as her father, but I had no idea they were sleeping together. It wasn't until recently I found out through a mutual friend that Jane had been hooking up with this guy. It seemed like she wasn't even trying to hide the affair, but didn't tell me specifically because she knew I'd object to it. When confronted, she attempted to gaslight me and lie straight to my face. But after I made it clear that I knew what was going on and that she would have one final chance to be honest with me, she finally then admitted to it. She said it only happened once or twice, but I don't fully believe that either. I, of course, told her that she needed to tell her fiancé, as well as this man's wife, but she does not want to do it. According to her, they are just friends now, and since things didn't work out between them, they decided not to tell their partners. I think that's a terrible thing to do, but everyone I've talked to has told me not to say anything because it's not my place. I don't want to throw away 15 years of friendship over a situation that frankly doesn't involve me, but I'm hurt and very angry that she tried to lie and gaslight me. I do not think I can attend her wedding and be happy for her knowing that she's been cheating on her partner. At this point, I'm even having doubts about having her in my wedding as well. So with all things considered, would it be appropriate for me to step down from my maid of honor position? And should I really leave the situation alone, or should I insist she tells her partner? I really don't know where to go from here. What should I do? I don't think it's unreasonable to step down as the maid of honor in this situation. Your friend betrayed your trust. She lied straight to your face, and when she was confronted with it, she tried to gaslight you. That's really toxic behavior in my opinion. Also, 15 years of friendship doesn't mean much when that person is cheating on their fiancé that they're about to marry in a few months. That's really ridiculous. There is the other option that you could tell the fiancé that this has been going on. I think that man has the right to know that his future wife has been going behind his back. Just imagine if your future husband went behind your back. Wouldn't you want someone to tell you that that's been going on? I know I would. I then would not want to marry someone like that at all. And I don't think that's you getting involved in the situation. I think that's you just being a good person if you did want to go that route. You could even do this anonymously and give him a tip off in some way where you're not identified as the person who said it. That might be your best bet to avoid any kind of drama in the situation. And if you did do that, I would do it after you withdraw from the maid of honor position, while also removing her from your wedding. It's a very sticky situation, and it's one that no one would want to be in. But I would personally want to know if my future wife was cheating on me, even if it was allegedly just 1 or 2 times. My fiancé accused me of using him for his parents' money during a fight, and now I'm having trouble getting over that comment, and I don't know what to do. For context, his parents are very wealthy, and my mom raised me and my brother by herself, so we were never well off. We were not destitute, but I have memories of eating the same frozen dinner for weeks at a time, or her losing it when we used too much printer ink. Just lower middle class things. When we got engaged at the beginning of this year, we went to both of our parents to ask for help with a wedding. My mom said she could cover the venue, and his parents said that they would pay for the entire wedding or help buy us a house. We obviously dropped the wedding plans and moved forward with buying a house. So we bought the home in spring, and after covering the down payments and closing costs, there was still a bit left over from the money his parents gave us. We used it to buy paint and other house things we needed, like curtains, vacuums, stuff like that. We then put a chunk of it into our savings account for future home improvement. After that, we had $4,000 left that we mutually agreed to split between us. His parents were aware that there was money left over and didn't expect it back or anything like that. And also, the money my mom had offered when we were wedding planning, she still gave to us to buy a new bedroom furniture set. I used my half of that money to pay my car off and put it into credit card debt. So now to the present day, my fiancé and I are not great at fighting, and it's something we both know we need to work on. He in particular has a habit of saying mean things just to be hurtful. For example, he's told me that the autoimmune disease I have is just my problem and that he doesn't need to care about it. He's told me that I make him miserable, stuff like that. Yesterday, when we were fighting, I told him that we are mean people when we fight, and it makes me think we might be incompatible, and that's when he accused me of using him for his parents' money. I was in shock and asked him why he would think that, and he said, "Because you told me about growing up poor." He also said he's had that thought in the back of his head since we bought the house. This is not only super offensive, but also makes no sense. We bought a small house within our means, and I remember his parents saying we should buy a bigger house and they would help cover the monthly mortgage, which I declined because I thought that sounded inappropriate and I didn't want to rely on them in that way. They also recently said they are still willing to cover our wedding, but only if we get married in their state, which I also don't really want to do for the above reason. And I told my fiance that earlier this week, so I'm really not sure where he got this idea that I'm only with him to try and get after their money. We talked down our fight and got to a place of awkward understanding, but to be honest, I'm still hurt and very angry. I now feel paranoid that maybe his family said something that made him think this way. I also feel very annoyed because I know he's had a pretty spoiled life and he hasn't struggled with finances like I have. Also, I feel sad to think that he's been thinking this way about me for months and I didn't even know. He's apologized and he wants us to work on fixing things, and I think I do too, but then I think of it all over again and I get overwhelmed. How can I get over this? What should I do? This is a really tricky situation because yes, your boyfriend becomes incredibly toxic when he starts arguing with you, but there is no reason for him to go so extreme with it. I mean, he has said some very terrible things that in my opinion are very big red flags. Like, he goes off the handle. It's one thing to get into some kind of petty argument about stuff, but to seriously make the claim that your future wife is only with you because of your parents' money is not only super toxic, but is also really showing of how they really feel about them. It reminds me of how someone can say something really nasty and then try and cover up what they said by saying, "Oh, I was just kidding." Like, no, you probably meant some of that. And it kind of makes me feel the same way in this situation. And while I'm sure there's things that you need to work on as well, I think it's time to sit down with your future husband and let him know straight up that these types of arguments can't happen anymore. He can't say such nasty things about you and expect there not to be some kind of friction, because he has clearly crossed the line one too many times. And unless this is addressed, it's not going to get better. My sister tried to sabotage my job, and now I don't know what to do. For context, my sister and I have never really been close. She has serious behavioral and anger issues. Before this, we had a cordial but distant relationship. I used to work at a private business. I got along really well with my boss and most of my coworkers. We were honestly like a family. My boss supported a very specific political figure that I personally do not subscribe to, and he liked to talk politics with some of my coworkers in private, but this never affected my relationship with him. While my sister and I were visiting my parents, I mentioned to my mom how my boss supports this very specific political figure. My sister, who is very much against this political figure, told me that she wanted to review bomb my boss's Yelp page so that she could get rid of people who follow this political figurehead, especially in her own neighborhood. I told her that that was a terrible, downright stupid thing to do. I liked my boss. He never brought politics into his work, and that she would be hurting me by doing this. I also told her how easy it is to trace a Yelp review, and that I could be implicated if she did that. I begged her not to do it, and she eventually relented, but told me she couldn't associate with me because I was a traitor apparently, which is fine with me, whatever. After that, I just ignored her. Well, imagine how I felt 2 weeks later when my boss called me up saying there was a horrible review on his Yelp page, calling him all kinds of terrible things based on his political preferences, and asking why it was traced to my family's address. I was so humiliated and absolutely disgusted. I had to tell him that it was my sister and that she has some serious issues. He understood but was obviously upset. I confronted my sister and she refused to take the review down. Only after my parents threatened to stop paying her internet bills did she finally take it down, but she refused to apologize. 3 months later, she texted me to apologize for hurting me, but said that she did not regret doing what she did. She also made fun of my boss for taking the review so seriously. I told her that was a terrible apology. She should apologize for what she did because she betrayed my trust and put my job in jeopardy. She sent me another apology that was a bit more thought out after that, but I was suspicious. The writing didn't sound like hers. In fact, the texting style sounded a lot like my dad. So during Thanksgiving, I snuck into my father's phone phone and would later come to find out that my father wrote that apology for her. I also found a bunch of text messages from my sister calling me all kinds of terrible names, all behind my back. I'm now completely heartbroken. I know my father just wanted us to make up and move on, but knowing that he saw what my sister was saying about me and still continue to help her is just absolutely horrible. I'm also so shook up over the fact that she would betray my trust this way and put my job in jeopardy. I'm still so humiliated and broken over it. I don't know what to do. She hasn't spoken to me since. I want to cut her from my life for good, but I know that it will just hurt my parents. But at the same time, how can I be close to someone who disregards my feelings in such a dangerous way? How do I let my parents know how much their daughter hurt me? What should I do? First off, I want to say that your sister is crazy. The fact that she feels that strongly about someone else's political opinion enough to try and ruin your job is just crazy to me. It's completely inappropriate. So I think sitting down with your parents and explaining to them exactly how you feel about your sister and how she tried to basically get you fired is the reason why you want to cut her off. And there is a chance that they won't be on board with the way you're talking about your sister. I think you really do need to do what's best for you. Your sister has already proven that she is very toxic and she does not care about you. So it might be time to do the best thing for you personally instead of dealing with a toxic family member who actively tried to ruin your job. An entitled Karen crashed into my car with no insurance and demanded that I pay her $10,000 in cash just to cover her damages. And once I refused to do that, she called the cops and things escalated from there. Here's what happened. So first, some backstory. I own a Jeep and it's fully built, it's got a lift kit, it's got ADD bumpers, and it's pretty much decked out the way you would want it to be. So one day I'm coming home from work and it's a summer day, so the roof is off and I'm having some open top fun. I stop at a red light and then suddenly there's a bang and my car lurches forward. I drive forward slightly and go back to assess the damage, and lo and behold, it's a Mercedes C-Class, and it's a new one at that. It's completely destroyed from the front and my beautiful Jeep had no damage apart from maybe a few scratches. I then went back to go check on the passenger of the Mercedes. I got them out and luckily she was unharmed, but this entitled Karen did not stay civil very long because in literally under a minute, right after she's out of the car, she starts screaming about how I wrecked her car. I told her calmly that she was the one that rammed into me. After all, I was sitting at a stoplight, but I think she understood how my hitting her car would be impossible. I then offered to share our insurance details because I know that the damages to a Mercedes is not going to come cheap. But then she said something that absolutely blew my mind. She said that she didn't have insurance. Instead, she demanded that I pay her $10,000 in cash just to cover the damages. And at this point, I'm just stunned at how wrong this is. Because for one, she hit me, not the other way around. And also, it's her fault for not having insurance, not mine. She then went on to ramble about how her kids needed the money, saying they had no money at the time, and now her kids will starve because she will have to pay to fix her car, and how it will be my fault when they are on the street tomorrow. And at this point, I didn't believe this lady in the slightest. This lady owns a Mercedes. I doubt that they're going to be on the street anytime soon. When she demanded the $10,000 in cash, I told her no. So she decided to escalate this to a place that I never thought would happen. She said that she would call the cops if I didn't pay her. And again, after she said this, I refused, as this is just completely dumb. And so she did just that. She called the cops. The cops came and assessed the damage and asked us what happened. And she said, and I quote, "This man backed into me at full speed on a red light." All I could do at that moment was just shake my head, because that couldn't be further from the truth. The cops then asked me what happened on my end, and so I told them. And it became clear that this was my word against hers. But much to this Karen's dismay, a local shopkeeper was there as well and saw the whole thing, and even captured it on a surveillance camera. Needless to say, I came out on top. The cops got her for reckless driving and driving without insurance. She then started yelling at the cops about how they would just let a criminal get away like that. They explained that I did nothing wrong and that they now had video evidence that she was in the wrong. The partner of the cop came to me and told me that if I can drive, I can leave. So I got in the Jeep and I left. And honestly, after that, I never want to have a Karen experience like that ever again. How crazy do you have to be to not only ram into someone at a red light, but then straight up lie to the police officer right to his face? That's probably the worst idea this lady had all day. And how on earth could someone really drive around without insurance on their car? That's actually crazy to me, especially a Mercedes. That is so expensive. Not to mention the fact that she tried to get $10,000 out of this guy's pocket pocket just to pay for her damages. But in my opinion, if you can afford a Mercedes and not have insurance, then you can afford your stupid mistake of ramming into somebody and costing thousands of dollars in damage. In my opinion, she earned her reward, and maybe next time she'll learn to step on the brake once in a while. I just found out that my long-distance boyfriend is actually a catfish, and now I'm heartbroken and I don't know what to do. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I've been supposedly dating this guy for about 6 to 7 months. We met online through TikTok, and one thing led to another, and we developed a more intimate relationship. Everything only through text messaging though. We talked about deep personal stuff, our worries, our jobs, stuff like that. We both even had losses in our families and consoled each other about it. I was caught in a pretty vulnerable time in my life, so I guess that helped the situation. I asked multiple times to call or video call, but he said he was shy. He said he would just do it later, and I just kind of brushed it off, since I'm naturally kind of an understanding person, or gullible as it looks like. And we had already exchanged photos all the time. As a side note, he had already seen me through video on TikTok, as well as videos that I sent him. We even discussed traveling to each other's cities, but couldn't make it happen because of our jobs. Long story short, tonight, out of the blue, unprompted, I decided to do a reverse Google search on one of his selfies. Who knows what guardian angel was smacking my head? Lo and behold, his face is all over Google. Not only that, all of his life, his family, pets, house, everything. He straight up impersonated this really big YouTuber. I'm not gonna say their name, but they have about 500,000 subscribers, and at the time, I had no idea who this person was. So he had massive amounts of content to find photos, all according to the situations we were talking about. I am still shocked of how well he played that game. Here's the issue. Throughout this relationship, I sent him some pictures of me that are a little bit more intimate in nature. Nothing too much, but too much for me. Stuff I wouldn't be too happy with, especially if it was plastered all over the internet. As I said, I am active on TikTok and YouTube, and I have a Discord channel, and he is in all of those. At this point, I'm really not sure how to handle this and what his reaction will be. Frankly, I'm mostly just still in shock. I'm mostly thinking of just silently breaking up with him and hoping he'll move on and leave me alone. I'm omitting details partly because I'm worried he might be in here, and partly because I am crying and trembling as I type. Yes, I'm an idiot, but no harsh judgment, please. I'm already shocked and devastated as it is. What should I do? This is absolutely horrific. I feel so bad for this person. It's bad enough to get catfished, but it's another thing to find out that they have pictures of you that you would not want on the internet. That is honestly heartbreaking. And I think your plan of silently breaking up with him and then eventually distancing yourself from him completely is probably the safest bet. You could just straight up expose this person and drag them through the mud like I'm sure you want to, but he could try and use those pictures against you, which is an unfortunate fact about this situation. But regardless of what happens, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with this. Online dating can be super sketchy, especially when you get catfish like this. So hopefully he handles it well, and hopefully he just leaves you alone and moves on. I have a crush on my coworker, but she's a lot younger than me, so I don't know if I should ask her out or if I should just let this go. A little bit of background for myself. I'm a 37-year-old male, and I'm not exactly in great shape, as I'm fairly overweight. I have arthritis in one of my knees, bad enough to where I have to walk with a cane, and I have some trouble hearing due to years of listening to loud music. Due to horrible self-esteem and much teasing back during my school days, I've never really gotten the confidence to be able to go on a date with anyone, and have never really had any sort of actual dating relationship. Unlike a lot of the posts I've seen where people are like, oh man, I'm so oblivious, people flirt with me, I just don't notice until it's too late. In contrast, I don't think I've ever really had anyone flirt with me. So as the title says, I have a crush on one of my coworkers. She's really smart, she's into a lot of the same hobbies I am. We seem to get along at work really well, and there's definitely a possibility we could have something going on. And if I wasn't such a chicken, I would ask her out. I can definitely make her laugh, even when we are both worn out from work. And while she's a vegetarian and I'm not, I don't think that's really that much of a deal breaker, where something to start between us. However, this is probably the biggest reason I haven't tried anything, but this person is 19 years old. Not to say that she's not capable of making her own choices with regards to dating due to her age, but I mean my parents were at a similar age when they first got together, and that is also to say nothing about modern celebrity relationships. At the same time, I don't want to mess up any sort of professional relationship that I might have with her. I mean, I am going after someone that's literally half my age. On the other hand, I don't know if I could find anyone that I would really click with in my area like I feel I do with her, especially not without having their own baggage of previous relationships. So it begs the question, should I ask her out? This is all at the risk of the professional relationship in exchange for a personal one. Or should I keep my mouth shut and let someone pass me by in the hopes that I might find someone a little closer in age, even if it might take me longer just to find them? What should I do? I think asking her out would be a very bad idea. Not just from the age difference, which is the biggest reason in my opinion, but my personal preference is to not go after coworkers unless I know for a fact that it's not going to ruin work. But the age difference is just way too big, and there's probably a really good chance, if I were willing to guess, that she's being nice to you because she's at work. And generally speaking, that's typically what's expected of someone when they go to work. And it really is going to drive a wedge in your professional relationship with just about everybody in the office if you try to pursue the 19-year-old for a relationship. From the outside looking in, I'm sure you mean well, but it definitely comes off a little weird. So I would say try and look into someone that's your age. With all of the options online, I'm sure you can find someone who's your age that will love you in the way that you've always looked for. Because otherwise, in my opinion, asking this teenager out on a date is only going to make things weird and incredibly awkward. Today, I messed up by accidentally throwing my phone away, and boy am I upset. I was having lunch yesterday at my table, and somehow the topic of my book bag came into the conversation. As I removed and flaunted about all the stuff I carried around school, I noticed there was some dirt in the bag. So of course, I went to the trash can and did a little shake just to get the dirt out, all while carrying it upside down. While doing so, I heard a little thump in the trash can. So I did a quick glance, didn't think I saw anything unusual, and carried on my day. Now it's about an hour since lunch ended, and I'm walking home from school. I remember that I should probably remind my mom that I have work today, and instinctively, I went to retrieve my phone from my bag. To elaborate, my bag has a pouch that's almost like a pocket, of which I place my phone and other miscellaneous items in there. So when I'm trying to reach for it, I realize my phone isn't there. I check inside my bag, but there's no luck. Maybe it's stuck in between one of my folders. I check that, and again, it's not there. At this moment, I'm starting to panic and racing back to the school to look for my phone. During this, all the possible situations fly through my head. At first, I thought someone stole it, but when I thought about that, it didn't make much sense. Then I thought I might have left it on the cafeteria floor, and that was precisely the moment it hit me. The trash can, the upside down book bag, the thump. It was all connecting together and starting to make sense. Now I'm panicking even more. When I get back to the school, I explain my predicament, and of course, it seemed like no one would help me. Most likely, all the trash bags were already taken from the cafeteria and put out into the dumpster, where they cannot allow students to search due to it being a safety hazard. Later, when my mom came along with me to see if anything could be done, one of the vice principals explained that the custodians could try to look for it and I could check back tomorrow, but it honestly sounded like school lingo of them basically saying, yeah, you're never gonna get that phone back. Now my parents are mad at me for being the careless person that I am. I lost a way of communication between my parents and my friends. I lost all the things that I kept on there, including my work schedule. I cannot sign into my email because of Google's two-step verification that is mainly accessed on my phone. And now I'm a dejected mess who's really just trying to smile and make a joke out of all of it and not think too much about it. I think I would scream if I lost my phone by accident. That is a really terrible situation to be stuck in. And you're right, there's no way those cafeteria workers are gonna jump in that dumpster just to look for your phone. So I think it's safe to say that it is definitely gone forever. But even with that in mind, I don't think it would be that hard to try and track it down, right? Like all you would have to do is find all the trash bags from that day alone and then just start feeling through it. Like it wouldn't be that hard to let a student go up there with supervision and start feeling around the bags to see if they can find their phone. Like that's totally possible. I don't see anything wrong with that personally. If I was in your shoes, I probably would have just jumped in that dumpster anyways without them knowing and look for my phone, or at least figure out which dumpsters they threw all the trash in, waited until they were not around, and then looked anyways. The worst that could happen is you get in trouble and they tell you to leave. But in my opinion, it's worth the risk just so I can get my phone. But hopefully the cost for a new phone isn't that much. And hopefully next time you hold on to it and you don't accidentally throw it away. My classmate is trying to ruin my reputation at school, and I'm worried that she's starting to succeed, and I don't know what to do. So I attend a graduate program with someone by the name of Abby. That's not her real name. The environment at school is generally very competitive and rather toxic because everyone wants post-graduation jobs, and there isn't enough to go around to all the students. This means we're all competing for the top grades, internships, and extracurriculars. My dad, who is in the same profession as me, says that everyone kind of chills out eventually once we graduate, but that's definitely not the case right now. My personality is introverted and reserved, and my style is basically to keep my head down and work hard. It's paid off because I'm one of the top students in our grade, and I also landed the most desired internship. internship. Most people, except very close friends, don't know this because I dislike talking or bragging about myself. But Abby somehow found out. A group of us went out to eat, and at one point she and I were alone, and she made sure to tell me that I didn't deserve my internship, stating that it was a fluke, and that I must have bribed a good friend who works for the program department to get me in. As a side note, I would never do that. This friend is like 1 out of like 200 workers. They are low on the totem pole and have no sway whatsoever in picking interns. I'm really non-confrontational, so I just smiled uncomfortably. I said I didn't think that was the case, and I kept trying to change the subject, but she wouldn't let it go. She doubled, tripled, then quadrupled down, and kept repeating that it was a fluke over and over again. Frankly, it was quite bizarre. Anyway, since then, it's been her personal vendetta to try and bring me down. She's been whispering in people's ear that I got the internship through connections. She also spread the rumor that I'm lazy, telling people that I'm incompetent, clumsy, and that I'm always turning in assignments late. The last one is kind of a head scratcher because I tend to turn in assignments early just in case. On the surface, it seems rather harmless, but it's scary to me that people are actually starting to believe her. A mutual friend teased me the other day about always turning in assignments at the last minute, and when I told her that I actually turned them in early, she was just like, "Oh, sure you do." Abby is really social. She knows a lot of people and is close with the professors, and is the big sister figure everyone relies on. It's starting to really scare me just how much she's been changing other people's perception of me. This profession is small, and having a reputation for being lazy and incompetent will definitely be detrimental to me. It's easy to say that the people who really know me will also know that the things she's saying are just absolute garbage. And while that's true, it just goes back to the competitive and toxic environment thing. There are a lot of people, even so-called friends, who want to believe these things. They want to think that everything I've achieved is indeed a fluke, instead of being earned by merit or hard work. I'm really scared over all this, and I feel really helpless. What am I supposed to do? This is a really terrible situation because this is so uncalled for. It's obvious that Abby is very intimidated by the thing that you have. You got the most desired internship in your program, and she's trying everything she can to try and tear you down and ruin your reputation. And in my opinion, there's a few ways you can go about doing this. First and foremost, I would immediately go to the department head and report this lady for spreading lies about you. I don't care who they are or what kind of influence they have. Nothing is more influential than the department head. They will absolutely take care of this, and this should really be escalated. In the meantime, I would document everything that she's saying with date and timestamps so you can have a running record of everything that this lady's saying to you, because this is completely unacceptable. You might even be able to get a letter of confirmation from one of the department heads that chose you for this internship and allow them to put in writing that you got this internship because you performed better than any other candidate, and that is not because you happen to know somebody or that you paid somebody off, because that's so unethical it's not even funny. I think you have every right to be upset about this, and you have every right to step up and defend your good name, because to sit there and allow someone to defame your hard work and your good name would be so disrespectful to the woman who worked so hard just to get where she's at. So report her tomorrow and let the department head take care of this, because if someone wants to defame your good name, then they deserve the consequences that will come along with it. My friend and landlord wants my baby, and at this point I'm not sure what to do about this. So I'm a 37-year-old female and I'm about 6.5 months pregnant. It's a long story, but about 4 months ago I found myself homeless and desperate. Jessica, who's in her 50s, owns a house and had been renting the top floor, 3 small rooms and a small bedroom, as an Airbnb, where she made about $1,000 during a good month. She also gets disability for back pain and depression. We've known each other for about 5 years and we are decent enough friends, and even played in a band together years ago. When she heard about my situation, she told me that she's been wanting to close the Airbnb for a while because she hates cleaning it all the time, and that she always wanted to rent to a family with a baby, and that she would also love to be my babysitter when I went back to work. It sounded like a godsend, but I told her I could only afford about $685 a month. She said she will make it work because she is really excited to have a baby around, and she even let me crash on her couch for free for 2 months as the last guest trickled in upstairs. She has since picked up a 10-hour-a-week job cooking for a friend to supplement the lost income. Slowly over the last few months though, she has said things that make me feel very uncomfortable. One of her friends said something about us raising a child together, and that rubbed me the wrong way, but I just wrote it off as them joking around. Then another time, she said that when she's talking to her dog, she refers to herself as as mommy and that my kid might get confused. So it would be best if the baby learned to call her mommy and called me mama. With the most disgusted look on my face, I said that my child will understand that she is her dog's mommy and that she can be Auntie Jessica. And after she said these things, I started to push her away. Another thing she said was that sometimes when I laugh, I remind her of an ex-girlfriend. And after she said this, I was very uncomfortable. I believe I've made it clear in the past that I do not date women, but I'm worried she might have some weird crush on me despite her having a boyfriend. She is not in the least bit attractive to me, neither physically or personality-wise. As a side note, I've also come to realize that I do not feel comfortable letting her babysit 40 hours a week. She is on a lot of meds, sleeps through her dog barking loudly, and is generally just very myopic and scatterbrained. A few times, her prescriptions were late, and she was bedridden for days, experiencing really bad withdrawals. I can't imagine leaving my baby with her and going to work. I also haven't told her that I'm seeking alternative childcare yet. The other day, it got back to me that she's still telling people that she is my co-parent, and I'm at my wit's end. I have found myself snapping at her over several different things over the last few days as I try to find an opportunity for a conversation about this. But I also feel guilty. She has closed her business, is renting to me at a huge discount, and is willing to help me with my baby for free. She's also helping to host my baby shower, which is tomorrow. Anyone in my situation could consider this living in luxury, but I just feel this huge resentment and disgust towards her. How should I have this long overdue conversation with her? I need help forming how I can kindly, despite my internal rage, put a stop to her delusions. I don't know where to start. Admittedly, I worry about my rent going up or losing my housing if I upset her, but I also feel like this is all somehow my fault for, in essence, accepting her charity. What should I do? In my opinion, you need to find someplace else to live. This is not safe for you or your future child. The manipulation that is coming from your supposed friend right now and the creepy thing she's saying is just really bad. She knows you're desperate and she knows that you need a house, so she is holding the housing that she's giving you over your head to try and manipulate you into letting her do whatever she wants. You are being manipulated so hard and you might not even realize it. This lady's also trying to pretend like this baby that you're about to have is also hers. That's like some creepy stuff right there. So in my opinion, if you really want to keep yourself safe as well as your future kids safe, get out while you can. Because this lady sounds absolutely crazy, and you would be a lot better off living literally anywhere else. My entitled mother, who has controlled every aspect of my life leading up to college, is making me choose between her or my future husband, and I honestly don't know what to do. Growing up, my mom had told me she was raising me to be the best child because she knew I would achieve more. My mom was way harsher on my grades, my sports activities, any clubs I was a part of, my looks, and my personal life. And this was way more than my little brother. And I have to admit, I grew up hating my little brother for all the freedom that he had. In contrast, I was always isolated. I was always grounded. I was working multiple jobs to not only save up for college, but to help with family bills. When my brother got a job, he was able to spend the money on what he wanted. In contrast, my mom told me what my career goals were. She told me what person I should marry and how she will move in with me after I buy my house to raise my children and then to take care of her. My mom was the type to blow money on designer stuff while we slept in hotels and cars at one point. I hated being poor. All I wanted was a house growing up, a nice house that was for all of us, even if it was small. If I dated someone my mom didn't approve of, she would do everything to sabotage the relationship because according to her, they were simply not good enough for me. Well, when I went to law school, and it was while I was getting my Juris degree that I met my now current boyfriend. And when I started dating him, I just knew that he was someone that I wanted to be with. We moved in together after 3 days, and we have not been away from each other ever since. I love his family, and they also love me. He was raised upper middle class and had an amazing set of parents. He was also top of the law school and just felt too perfect for me. But as you could probably guess, my mom disagreed. She didn't like him one bit because anytime she said something to make herself look smart, he would call her out and would say, "Nope, you're wrong." And if there's anything I know about my mother, it's that she hates being proven wrong. I told my boyfriend how my mother raised me and what she expects from me growing up. Well, he wasn't going to have it. He said she would be even lucky to know her grandchildren. My mom started to see her plans unraveling with my new boyfriend and tried to break us up multiple times. When she started making fun of his parents, he drew the line. He called her out and said that we're done with her. The panic was real from my mom at this moment. I was her ticket meal. She then demanded that I make a choice between my own mother or a man I was only dating for a year. And you know what? I chose my boyfriend. We have been together for almost 3 years now. I dropped from law school and work remotely at an amazing job. He graduated top of his class and was hired by a firm immediately. Our income is way above what I expected, and sometimes I cry at night for how blessed I feel. Growing up, I always begged to have a home that I could call my own. Now we may have a home together in a few years. She will send threats and make up excuses to try and contact me, just so she can try and insert herself back into my life. We plan to get married soon, and know we have to keep it really quiet, because she will call just to try and threaten us, or she might try and show up, which we most definitely don't want. The fact that your mother would try and make you some kind of cash cow that she could cash in on later in life is just beyond appalling. It's legitimately disgusting to treat your kids like that. This lady had no drive in her life. She clearly did nothing to try and secure any kind of future for herself or for her kids. So instead, she tries to work you like a horse just to try and leech off of your hard work, which is completely unfair. This man stepping into your life was probably the best thing that could have happened, because he literally gave you a ticket away from your mother, who for all intents and purposes is just a leech. That's all she is. So hopefully your new life with your boyfriend goes well, and hopefully you've taken the steps to block her on everything. Social media, phone calls, everything. Because this lady is toxic, and she will do everything she can to try and ruin your future marriage. My online best friend, who I have a crush on and have been flirting with like crazy, has stopped talking to me after we met up, and I honestly don't know what to do. I have been friends with this girl for over a year. She lives in a different country, so we have always talked over Discord. I developed a big crush on her after a while. She would flirt with me a lot, but I always just took it as her playing around, but I would still get overly excited about it. We planned to meet up at another friend's house with a group of friends. A couple days before we met up, she told me that someone told her that I have a crush on someone, and because of that, she told me to ask them out. So that's when I confessed to her that it was her that I liked. But we live thousands of miles apart, so it's a little complicated. She told me that back when we had recently met, she liked me too, but I was in a relationship at the time, so she backed off. Truth be told, I was never really enthused about having such a long-distance relationship, but I wanted to enjoy the time I spent with her. She really ramped up the flirting with me as well. She asked me to share her bed on the trip and asked me if I wanted to go out with her there. I told her I would love to, and told her how excited I was to see her as well as just to hug her. She told me that she was a little afraid that she would be disappointing to me in person, but I assured her that I don't think that would happen. When we met, things were great at first. I would hug her and cuddle her and tell her that she was really pretty and really cute, and she would say the same to me. After a few days, I noticed that she distanced herself a little more. She wouldn't sit next to me or cuddle me anymore, preferring to sit next to her other friend and lean on him instead. There was one awkward moment when we had a little bit too much of the herb, if you know what I mean, and she retreated into our room. We were planning to play video games that night, so I went back to our room to find her, and I saw her cuddling with another friend while he was rubbing her back. I was like, okay, I guess we're not playing video games then, whatever. And after that, I just left. I felt super uncomfortable. When I went to bed, she told me not to take anything she did too seriously, as at the time she had a little bit too much of the herb, and she was out of her mind, as she put it. I told her it was okay, and I just felt a little awkward from interrupting her with her friend, and so I just went back to sleep. The next day, she told me that she had actually wanted to tell her friend to stop rubbing her back as it was triggering bad memories, but she was too out of it to properly articulate that. I told her it was fine and apologized for acting weird. Things seemed to be fine after that. She was still not acting romantic towards me, but she didn't avoid me, and we had a ton of laughs and a lot of fun together. One night after we watched a movie, I spilled my feelings to her. I told her that she wasn't disappointing me, not in the slightest. In fact, she made me insanely happy to be around her. I told her that if anything, my feelings have gotten stronger. I told her that I was trying to be obvious about it, but trying to not come off way too strong or to creep her out in any way. She told me that she was happy with me too, but that she's just incredibly awkward overall in person. I told her I would love to spend more one-on-one time with her, and she told me I could come visit her in her country sometime. After that, I felt relieved to open up to her, as well as getting my feelings off my chest. For the rest of our time together, she acted a bit hot and cold with me. One day she would be sweet and charming with me, buying us matching necklaces and cute things like that, and the next day she would be distancing herself again. She never completely avoided me, and I did my best to make her laugh and smile. When it was finally time to leave, I was pretty bummed out to have to say goodbye to everyone, and I told her that. She hugged me before I left for the airport and told me we could play Fortnite with the group tomorrow. I agreed and I went home. The next day, I went to work and told my coworkers about everything that happened. They told me I should give her some space and let her reach out to me and invited me out for food and drinks after work. So I texted in the group chat that I would be going out tonight and not coming on for Fortnite. I waited for her to message me, but she didn't say anything to me directly, only posting in the group chat sometimes. She then announced that she was leaving the server we ran together for an undetermined amount of time, and yet still, she didn't have anything to say to me. After a week of not talking, I logged on to Fortnite to see the update. I saw she was online, and so I messaged her saying, "Hey, you on for some Fortnite?" She then suddenly logged off and didn't respond, so I thought she just went to bed. Later that night, I did see her active on Facebook, so I just thought she wasn't on Discord. The next day, which is today, she still hadn't messaged me back, so I asked if she was mad at me, and she still didn't reply. So I told her to please tell me if there's something I did wrong. She always told me about everything before, so it was really hurtful and confusing to me that she was just ignoring me now all of a sudden. I thought we parted on a good note. She still hasn't responded, but has been posting on Facebook, and right now I'm at a complete loss for what to do. Did I make her not want to talk to me anymore or something? I get the picture that she doesn't have the feelings for me that I have for her, but I don't see why she couldn't just tell me that she wanted to just be friends. The only thing I can think of is that she could be mad at me for not playing Fortnite with her like I said, and for not messaging her directly for a week. Still, she didn't message me either, so I don't understand what right she has to be mad at me for it. I'm just really heartbroken and afraid she doesn't want to be friends anymore. I always thought we really cared about each other, so I'm absolutely blindsided that she would be the kind of person to just drop me out of the blue. Does anyone have any advice on what to do, or has maybe gone through something similar like this? This is honestly tearing me up inside, and I don't know what to do. I think the writing's on the wall. I don't think this girl likes you the way that you like her, and she's too afraid to confront you and say it. She clearly does not like confrontation, and she's intentionally avoiding you to try and get out of this situation, which in my opinion is very, very rude and very telling of her personality. At this point, you gotta really accept what her answer is, and her answer is silence. You've tried reaching out, you've tried to see if there's something that you did wrong that would probably cause any kind of problems in this relationship, but she refuses to talk to you, despite clearly being online, as well as clearly posting on Facebook. So let that be your answer. I know it's not a good answer because you did meet this person in real life, and you thought that she liked you the way that you like her, but clearly that's just not the case. So if anything, I would give her distance and let her come to you if she really is interested, because sending a bunch of messages is not going to do you any good. If anything, it's only going to drive her away even more. So hopefully you're able to find answers. But I think if anything, it's time to accept that you might not get any answers and just move on and find someone who really will care about you. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not attending my girlfriend's uncle's funeral? So me and my girlfriend are on the edge of being a thing of the past. We have been together for 6 months and we've had our ups and downs, but there were much more good days than there were bad. For some backstory, I live in a very southern conservative state, and I am also black ethnically. Me and my girlfriend went to school together, and that's how we met. We quickly fell in love with each other, and our relationship progressed really fast as we were talking about getting an apartment together. However, at the start of our relationship, my girlfriend told me something just a little unsettling. Long story short, her family is racist. There's no other way to put it. She said she didn't care, and that she wouldn't let it interfere with our relationship, so I went with it. So my girlfriend tells her parents everything, which is no problem. My girlfriend isn't the most mentally healthy, as she does struggle with depression and anxiety, and I believe I am not as well, but I am not diagnosed like her. I have an issue with showing emotion due to past experiences, but I make sure my girlfriend knows that I love her and would do close to anything for her. But there was one thing I couldn't say yes to. It has caused our relationship to crumble, and I also feel her parents told her things about me that I believe are totally unfair to hold against me given the circumstances. With my girlfriend's family being the way that they are, I am not allowed to come over to their house, but she comes to mine. This is just as a reference of how our relationship works around her family. A lot of times her family will call her out of nowhere and make her come home without explanation, despite her being a grown adult and paying them rent. This only occurs when she is with me too, by the way. Fast forward to last month and her notorious uncle passed away. It has caused a great rift in our relationship. My girlfriend asked me if I would be coming to his funeral, and I declined because of the way her family is, and I thought she understood as she claimed that she did. I promised to be as supportive as possible from a distance, and we agreed on that. A week goes by and the funeral came and went. During the time, I couldn't see her for obvious reasons, but we FaceTimed the whole week, week. Now, my girlfriend has been distant, and when I asked her why, she said she thinks I don't love her and that I don't treat her right because of my absence at the funeral that we both knew I wouldn't be at. We have never questioned love for one another until this point. The sudden change of heart makes me think her family pushed her into believing this. We have argued about it the past couple of weeks, but yesterday I was at my wit's end. My girlfriend continued to use it against me, and I finally said, "What on earth made you think it was a good idea to bring your black boyfriend to a man's funeral who was very much against people like me?" And I know I could have said this better, but I said it out of anger, and I really don't have an excuse. I just think it's a strange thing to hold against somebody, especially when they've never been in my shoes in this way. Now my girlfriend says I went too far and doesn't know if she wants to continue during our arguments. I do regret how I said things, but to be fair, this is exactly how she described them to me, so I believe I had every right to say what she was saying. I don't want to lose her over this, but she is really torn on keeping me around. So it begs the question, am I the jerk for not attending her uncle's funeral? You are not the jerk in this situation. Her immediate family, as well as her extended family, harbor crazy prejudices, and I would not blame you for not wanting to be around that. That's literally the last place I would want to be if I was in your shoes, and I can't imagine being in that kind of situation. The fact that she's not more understanding of that and doesn't make more of an obvious effort to distance herself from that type of language and thought is astonishing to me. I mean, I'm surprised that this relationship has lasted even this long, to be completely honest with you. I can completely understand that her uncle passed away, and sure, he is still family, and you want to try and have some kind of services associated with him, but nonetheless, I think for her to completely ignore where you're coming from, as well as why you don't want to be around her family based on what she has blatantly told you, is a big red flag in my opinion. So I would personally take a good hard look at your relationship with her, because this does not look like a healthy relationship unless some serious changes are made on her end. My sister has a toxic marriage, and it's the main reason why I don't hang around her anymore, and I'm stuck not knowing how to explain this to her, and I don't know what to do. The title says it all. I'm having trouble being there for my sister, and I'm not sure how to tell her why. I'm about 2 years out of a 17-year marriage that ended extremely badly. We had issues throughout the relationship, but the last couple of years, he was intensely controlling, abusive, and violent, and since he left, I've done a lot of work to recover and get myself in a healthy headspace. My sister went through a rough patch around the same time my divorce started, and I learned way too much about her husband, and this made me never want to trust him again. They've been together for years, and while he's never been my family's favorite, we all just kind of dealt with it because she loved him and we wanted to support her. But since their rough patch, I have not been able to be around him. During that time, he served her with divorce papers and told her he was going to take their 1-year-old baby away and never let my sister see her again. He convinced my sister she would lose in court anyways, to the point that her plan was to give up, sign all the paperwork he gave her, and leave their baby while she moved out of state with our other sister. This all sounds bad, but my sister is extremely naive and also has the worst anxiety I've ever seen. She was convinced that she would lose their baby no matter what, and she was so broken down, she didn't have it in her to fight. She told me this plan, and I successfully talked her out of it. I got her a great lawyer, and she was on her way towards accepting their divorce and rebuilding her life. That is, until he suddenly changed his mind, and they reconciled and have been acting like everything is fine ever since. During her eventually abandoned divorce, my sister was terrified of being homeless and not having anywhere to go. I was starting over too, so our plan was that I would buy a place to live, so she as well as her baby could live there with me, as well as my little brother, who would be in this home with us. I went ahead with that plan and have just been renting out my sister's space and let her know it's there if she ever needs it. I cannot be around my sister's husband at all. I've been behind the scenes. I know he's abusing her emotionally, financially, and I strongly suspect physically too, although she would never admit it. I am aware that the right thing to do here is to support her decision and grin and bear his company, but I simply can't do it. I get that it's immature of me, but the situation is too much like my own marriage, and I won't be within 100 feet of it. I especially don't want him in my new home, which for 2 years has been a happy, healthy, and peaceful safe zone. My sister basically won't leave the house without this man, all because of her anxiety and also his controlling issues, and they are literally always together. She posted on Instagram a few weeks ago about being sad and confused about why her family never spends time with her anymore. I'd like to gently explain the situation to her, but I'm not sure how to tactfully say it's not you, it's your awful husband that we cannot stand. I'm honestly looking for advice on how to do this because I'm honestly at a loss. boss, and I'm not sure what to do. This is a really hard one because, as you said it, she's in a very sketchy situation. Her husband is actively a terrible person, and he has insinuated some awful things to her. So for your own personal well-being, I don't blame you for deciding, hey, I'm not going to be around this man. You could very well discuss this to her in private, but I think that's where it needs to stay. This needs to be a private situation. To publicly discuss this would be very disrespectful to your sister, as well as everybody around you, because this is obviously a very sensitive subject. But I think you have it right. You really do need to just support her no matter what, especially since it sounds like she was the victim of all of this. So hopefully it works out, and hopefully your sister comes to her senses and is able to get away from her really abusive husband, because nobody deserves to be treated like that. My twin sister is in a toxic relationship, and I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm a 26-year-old female, and my twin sister is dating her toxic boyfriend. I'm also going to be using fake names. So my sister's fake name is going to be Emily, and her boyfriend's fake name is going to be Justin. So Emily and Justin have been dating for about 3 months now. Emily and I are extremely close, especially when you consider that we're identical twins. We live an hour apart, but we'll see each other usually once or twice a week. We have a lot in common. We have some of the same interests, we have the same style, similar personalities, but we do have different tastes in partners. Justin is very manipulative and is slowly changing small things about her, and thus is removing parts of her personality to the point that I don't even know who my twin is anymore. When they started dating, she had a full-time job, she had a working car, and she was living at our mom's house. About a week into dating, Emily basically started living at Justin's house about 20 minutes away from my mom's. Whenever she would go to Justin's, she would cut off all communication with us. No text messages, no phone calls, nothing. I do have her location on my phone, so at least I know where she was, but that was about it. She wouldn't just go to Justin's house for a few hours. She would go for days at a time, with basically zero communication with us. Not to mention, her cat is living at my mom's house, so my mom was forced to take care of him without Emily asking her, which was just blatantly rude. Mind you, this is literally 1 week into their relationship. Then, 2 weeks in, they start to go on these weekend trips to remote areas, 2 to 4 hours away from home. They wouldn't say when they were coming back. Emily would just kind of show back up after a few days, not giving my mom any heads up on when she would be returning. Then, after a few more weeks in, Emily's voice started changing. She started to slow down the end of her sentences and stretch out the length of her words in a way that was similar to the way Justin talks. On a trip about 4 weeks into their relationship, she sent us photos of them, and I noticed that her smile had changed. She used to smile with her teeth, and we have this big glowing contagious smiles, but now she smiled with her mouth pinned shut, the corners of her mouth turned up slightly. It is very ominous looking, and it just looks fake. I looked at photos of Justin, and he smiles with that closed mouth look as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he said something to her like, "You have such a nice smile, but I think you look prettier when you smile without your teeth," or something like that. Weeks later, about a month ago now, early to mid-August, she quit her job, all out of the blue. She quit her job with absolutely no plan to make money a different way. She also sold her completely fine working car and bought a very, very, very old junk car with over 300,000 miles on it that is falling apart. And I'm guessing it's because Justin had an old car similar to it. 2 weeks ago, she asked us now to call her M instead of Emily. Similarly, Justin now goes by Just, which Emily told us to now call him. So basically, out of the blue, Emily is now M and Justin is now Just. They both happen to want to change their names at the same time. I mean, that's just a coincidence, right? She claims that she always wanted an old truck. She always wanted to quit her job, and that she's always wanted to be called by the name M. Stuff that a twin sister would have known about if it was actually true. I 100% know that Justin has fed her into this belief on changing major things about her life that aren't actually what she wants to do. At the present day, Emily and Justin basically now live at his place. I never hear from her. My mom still takes care of her cat, and I don't know how my sister is making money. I don't know what her life plans are. She has no job, and she rarely talks to me. We used to be so close and attached to the hip, and now I don't even know who my own twin sister is. And at this point, I honestly don't know what to do. This sounds like some big red flags in my opinion. For all these things to be suddenly changing about her out of nowhere is quite concerning, especially since it coincides so much with how Justin is acting. That's just not fair for Emily in this situation. Based on what you've described, Justin really does look like the culprit behind all of this. Quitting your job, getting rid of your car, changing your name and the way you talk and laugh and smile, it all just sounds super super suspicious. So if I was in your shoes, I would definitely try and take time to pull my sister aside and say, hey, what is going on? Is there something you're not telling me, and are you safe? See if you can at least get some kind of alone time with her and explain to her that what you're seeing is really concerning, especially as her twin sister. You only want the best for her, right? And hopefully if you can explain that to her, she can understand that as well. Hopefully things are better than the way they look on the outside looking in, because if they really are as bad as you're describing, then this is probably a very bad situation for your twin. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.